You are an ungrateful dropout, Riley. Don't you dare come back here. Those were my mother's last words to me before she shut the door of our Arlington, Virginia colonial so hard the brass knocker rang like a bell. The hallway light sliced across the porch and framed my suitcase like evidence. Inside, I could hear the familiar music of our house, ice clinking in crystal, voices lounging around success. Then Serena's laugh bubbled up from the living room, bright and effortless as always. I was 22 and hollowed out. I'd left the College of Architecture at UVA a month before finals because it felt like someone had taken a wire brush to my thoughts. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I could draw for 30 seconds and then my hand would shake. I called home and said, I need help. And the help I got was a sermon. You were made for more than sketchbooks and shabby coffee, my father said. You want to play with crayons while your sister carries real responsibility? Vivian and Charles Hart, co-founders of a DC development firm, believed excellence arrived with perfect posture. They wanted daughters who looked like magazine covers and spoke like boardrooms. Serena slid into that story like it was tailored for her. I was a smudge on the page they were printing for their friends. They gave me a week to clear out my childhood room. On the last day, I stood on that porch with a suitcase and a backpack and the sick sense of falling. When the lock set clicked, something inside me did too. The first door that wouldn't open became a compass. Up close, my parents looked like a brand launch. Vivian's dress whispered money with every shift of fabric. Charles wore a tux that said success was a second language he'd taught himself to dream in. Serena shone because she had done the work, and the room was happy to believe all the light came from her. The Monday after the party, our pitch deck glowed on the visualization lab's screen like we'd lit a campfire in a clean room. Theo did his usual charming disarm. Mina handled the motion studies. The inhale, the exhale, the way a bronchial tree could look like a forest and still be practical. I took the parts that weren't pixels. The why. Patient brains are exhausted. Design has to do the thinking. A screen should treat you like you just ran up 3 flights of stairs. Short sentences, big buttons, no tricks. Dr. Levitt nodded with that deliberate cadence administrators use when they've decided to fund a thing. Let's begin with intake, imaging requests, and consent flows, he said. If we can save clinicians and patients 10 minutes each, we've bought a day. We set up a sprint calendar on the whiteboard. Sticky notes turned into weeks. Weeks turned into features. It felt like building a bridge over a river I already knew. Between meetings, I checked email and saw the subject line I hadn't expected to feel like relief. Trusteeship. Transfer. Initiated. The independent fiduciary wrote like a person who kept lists for fun. Ms. Hart. We have received all documents from prior trustees. Initial review indicates several years of required statements were not mailed to you. We will remediate. Please confirm bank details for scheduled disbursements, quarterly. We will set up a standing call, 15 minutes, first Tuesday of each month to answer questions and align with your goals for the fund. Best. Adina K. Walsh, CFA. I forwarded it to Marcus and felt the click of a door unlatching inside my chest. Not euphoria? Better. Order. At lunch, we took the lab team downstairs to a taco truck that made tortillas on a griddle bolted to hope. A resident named Priya described the current consent process. 17 screens, 3 different fonts, 4 separate next buttons. Patients say, just tell me where to sign. The forms are built to protect us from lawsuits, not to communicate risk. We can't rewrite the law, I said, but we can rewrite sentences. We sketched a version that used the right kind of white space and a progress bar that told the truth. Theo promised a prototype by Thursday. Mina asked if they would share click paths from last quarter. Priya said yes, like we'd handed her a ladder in a pit. The day moved the way good days do, tired at the edges, charged at the core. That evening, I drove back to Durham with a paper bag of empanadas on the passenger seat and the kind of satisfaction that makes silence feel like a friend. At home, Mabel did her welcome home trot that looks like a parade down a small-town main street. I tossed her a carrot. She chewed it like a cigar. I opened my inbox again because I'm not a person who leaves email alone. 2 new messages waited. The first was from Serena. Riley. We signed. I assume the fiduciary has reached you. I wanted to say this in my words, not behind a lawyer. I stood on that balcony with you because I believed I could make a case for what felt practical. Practicality is a good anesthetic for cruelty. I'm sorry. I won't ask for a reply. I don't know what a relationship looks like from here. I am leaving for Phoenix in 6 weeks. If there's anything of Mom's and Dad's you ever want out of the house before I go, photos, childhood things, I can collect them and ship them. If not, I'll keep my hands off what isn't mine. I know what isn't mine means now. S. I read it twice, then a third time, to make sure the shape of the apology wasn't a mirage. It was an absolution. It was a sentence with a subject and a verb that made sense. The second email was from Adina, quick on the heels of the first. Per your grandmother's letter, delivery confirmation. Ms. Hart. As part of trusteeship transfer, we received a sealed letter from your grandmother, Eleanor Hart, addressed to both granddaughters, to be delivered upon each beneficiary's first distribution. It appears the prior trustees did not transmit it. With your permission, we can courier a physical copy or scan and send a PDF. We will also forward your sisters under separate cover. Best. AWW. I clicked reply. So fast my finger hurt. Scan, please, and thank you. The PDF arrived 4 minutes later. Adina had scanned it in color, and I saw Grandma Eleanor's handwriting in a violet pen that bled a little at the curves. The first line landed like a hand on my hair. My girls. If you are reading this, something I planted long ago has finally poked a green nose out of the soil. Money is a tool. If you use it as a mirror, it will make you ugly. If you use it as a hammer, you will hit your thumb. If you use it as a key, you can open doors for people who have never seen the inside of certain rooms. I am not telling you what to build. I am only asking that you build with others in mind, and that you write an occasional postcard to your future self so she remembers who she promised to be. Love. Grandma E. I put the laptop down and cried in a way that felt clean. No self-pity, no spectacle, just salt and gratitude. Mabel leaned her head on my foot and sighed like she understood Will's. The next morning, I brought the letter to the studio and taped a printout above the sink where everyone reached for mugs. Under it, someone, Theo, stuck a post-it. Tools, keys, doors, add hinges. He drew a tiny door with hinges shaped like question marks. It made me laugh out loud, which made Kay shout from her desk, "What did Theo do now?" And I yelled back, "Art!" And Mina said, "Checks out!" We got to work. Progress marked itself with very unpoetic things. Jira tickets closed, Figma comments resolved, consent copy that made Dr. Levitt murmur human under his breath. Every 2 days we ran a hallway test. 5 people, $10 of coffee, 1 laptop. I watched hands move from the wrong button to the right one and wrote down why. Theo benchmarked load times. Mina tweaked animation speed until lungs felt calm instead of jaunty. After one session, a nurse looked at our intake screen and said, "Oh, thank God, this is like someone folded the laundry." And I wrote that compliment on a sticky note and put it in the good soup jar. On Friday afternoon, Theo stuck his head through my office door. "You have a visitor," he said. "I told the ancestors to use the lobby like everyone else," I said, not looking up. "This one has a tote bag and an aura of competence," he said. "Your name is Corinne Hart?" I looked up so fast my neck popped. "Aunt Corinne?" She stood in the doorway looking like a person who answered her own questions. Long gray braid, linen jacket, sneakers that had seen more museums than marathons. We hadn't spoken since I was 15, and she'd taken me to the Hirshhorn and said, "Art is allowed to be honest." "Hi, kid," she said, and I was for a beat. We hugged without the stiff choreography my parents prefer. She smelled like lemon and books. "I live in Carborough now," she said, settling into the chair by my small plant. "Been here 2 years. Heard rumblings through the family grapevine that something snapped back into place and figured I should stop being a rumor." "The party?" I said. "That! And your grandmother's letter finally doing what it was meant to. I should have asked sooner why you didn't receive it." Her eyes softened. "I am sorry." "It arrived," I said, tapping the print on the wall. "Right on time in a universe that runs late." She followed my gaze, read the letter, smiled. "She loved that pen," Corinne said, not ironically. "We fought about violet ink for 20 years. We talked about Grandma Eleanor's stubborn generosity and Charles's polished ambition and Vivian's terror of being seen without makeup. Corinne told me stories I'd never heard. How my grandmother worked nights at a diner while learning bookkeeping because numbers are just another way to listen. How she bought frankincense soap in bulk and gave bars to anyone who admitted to crying that week. She would have liked this place, Corinne said, eyes on the whiteboard. It looks like work and kindness have a truce here. We try, I said. We also forget to water the ficus sometimes. She reached into the tote. 2 things. First, these are copies of photographs from your grandmother's house before the estate was consolidated. She managed to fit a whole Greek chorus into a single pause. I kept them safe. They belong to you. I looked at the faces. Me and Serena with popsicles. Grandma Eleanor at a table full of receipts. My mother before she learned how to pose. It felt like recovering a language I'd heard as a child and then forgotten the grammar of. Second, Corinne said, I run a small foundation, micro grants to artists whose work intersects with health. A paramedic who paints, a sculptor who volunteers at hospice. Your name belongs on our advisory board. If you have time, no pressure. I understand your calendar is a dragon. Yes, I said before the dragon could speak. That sounds like exactly the door Grandma meant. She nodded once, like a conductor pleased with a downbeat. Good. Also, your little dog is making telepathic requests for a walk. Mabel had somehow osmosized into my office and was pressing her face against Corinne's shin. We laughed. The studio inhaled a new kind of air. The first crack in my parents' no-contact resolve arrived as an op-ed in a local Arlington newsletter with a readership of 3,000 and the persistence of a dandelion. The headline managed to be both vague and sharp. On the cost of estrangement. The byline said, Anonymous, but the sentences wore my mother's perfume. Sometimes adult children spin false narratives to justify their ingratitude. Privacy should still count for something when families are torn by spite. Theo set the printout on my desk like a dead bug on a paper towel. I'm guessing this is Vivian playing to her remaining audience. Marcus called before I could. I've already drafted a cease and desist citing the non-disparagement clause, he said. We'll send it to the newsletter and to their counsel. Do you want me to file for an injunction if it doesn't come down by end of day? Yes, I said. I hadn't needed to read past the second paragraph to feel the old flame trying to lick at my ankles. And send Vivian a copy of the portion of the agreement printed large enough to be read from the moon, he chuckled. With pleasure. By afternoon, the post was replaced with an apology from the editor about miscommunication regarding opinion pieces and ongoing personal legal matters. Marcus emailed a screenshot of a signed addendum reaffirming the non-disparagement clause. I forwarded it to Aunt Corinne with the subject line, Weed Control. She replied with a photo of her yanking a kudzu vine off a fence. Caption, There are metaphors, and there are metaphors. That night, Serena texted, I didn't know about the op-ed. I told Mom to take it down. She said it wasn't her. Then she cried for an hour. I think the crying is for herself. A second later, I'm sorry that last line was unkind. Then, I booked Phoenix. Program is brutal. I'm scared in a good way. You'll be good at fear, I typed, then erased. I wrote instead, good luck, drink water, sleep when you can, no heroics when you don't have to. She replied with heart and a scalpel emoji, which felt like progress or comedy or both. We delivered the first build to the lab 3 weeks later. The consent flow sang. Priya cried. Mina cried because Priya cried. Theo tried to pretend he doesn't cry and failed. Dr. Levitt looked at the final screen and said, I didn't have to ask where to click even once. Coming from a dean, that's basically a sonnet. We launched a pilot on 2 floors, collected metrics, and watched the dropout rate drop by a third in a week. Nurses reported that patients stopped apologizing for not understanding. A surgeon emailed at midnight. Whoever wrote the sentence, you can say no and still be a good patient. Thank you. Mina printed that and taped it above her monitor. Theo added a doodle of a superhero cape on the comma. Adina, the fiduciary, called for our standing check-in on the first Tuesday. How do you want to approach distributions? She asked. We can do automatic quarterly or as needed. As needed, I said. I want the default to be patients. Any philanthropic goals? She asked. Yes, I said, surprising myself with how ready the answer was. I want to set up a scholarship in Grandma's name for first-gen students studying design or allied health. Not merit only, resilience only. I paused. And a small emergency fund attached to it because the difference between staying and dropping out can be $300 at the wrong moment. Adina hummed like a person who approved of numbers-making ethics. We'll confer with council and propose a structure. After the call, I emailed the studio. We're going to sponsor 2 scholars next year, 1 designer, 1 nurse, both from North Carolina, both people the system often loses. Start thinking about the application that doesn't look like all the others. Kay replied with clapping emojis. Mina sent a meme of a door opening onto a field. Theo asked if the scholarship committee would accept bribes in the form of empanadas. I said no, but also maybe. A week before Serena left for Phoenix, an oddly heavy box appeared on my porch with no return address. Inside, beneath newspaper and a frankincense bar of soap that made me feel absurdly seen, sat 3 things wrapped in tissue. A ceramic dinosaur I'd made in 3rd grade, lopsided, earnest, a Polaroid of me at 12 holding a sketchbook bigger than my ribs, and an envelope addressed in my mother's handwriting. I stood there with the letter between my fingers for a long time, like it might bite. When I opened it, the paper crackled with the expensive stiffness she favors. Riley. This will not be good enough, but it is what I have. I was wrong. Not about wanting a good life for you, but about confusing good with visible. I believed I was protecting us when I cut you out. I was protecting a picture. Serena has explained the legal terms. We will abide by them. I will not contact you again unless you invite it. I only ask that you accept these few things I saved, without knowing why. V. There was a water spot on the bottom corner. You can fake tears in public. Paper rarely lies. I put the soap in the bathroom and the ceramic dinosaur on my bookshelf between a design manual and a novel about women who survive more than statistics say they should. The photo I taped inside the closet where I keep my coat. It felt right to greet the 12-year-old me on the way out the door. I didn't write back. I did text Serena. Got a box. Thank you, if that was you. It was, she replied. Mom wanted to burn everything. Dad didn't care. I liked the dinosaur. He's a classic, I wrote. She sent back a photo of a plastic ribcage with googly eyes stuck on it. Caption, My people now. Summer settled on Durham with heat that stuck to your skin like a promise. The studio's AC groaned valiantly. We bought a 2nd unit and named it Little Hero. The whiteboard filled, emptied, filled again. On Fridays, we instituted walk and talks on the Greenway because ideas like fresh air. Mabel hated the heat and sprawled under my desk like a hearthrug. On a Monday, Theo said, Landlord wants to raise the rent again. And I felt a familiar flicker, the old instability waking up like it had been tapped on the shoulder. How much? I asked. Enough to make us consider options, he said. We could move, or we could buy. The word landed with weight and possibility. Buy what? I asked. 2 blocks over, he said, eyes bright. Old textile building, brick, tall windows, bones for days. Zoning's kind. The owner is an 80-year-old named Edna who wants it to go to people who aren't boring. We walked there at lunch, sandwiches in hand. The building leaned a little in the way old things do when they've earned it. Sunlight wrote stories on the floor through panes dusty enough to make halo shapes. I could see the studio in it, the conference table under the long window, Mina's motion rig by the back wall, a shelf for scholarship recipients' letters we hadn't received yet. How? I asked, the practical voice making itself heard. Down payment, closing, build out, the part where this doesn't eat us. This is why you have a trust and a calm fiduciary, Theo said. We do it like adults. No heroics. Adina, when I called, sounded amused. Buying your own roof is often the least dramatic way to avoid drama, she said. I'll coordinate with a commercial lender. We'll be conservative. We'll leave a cushion. We like cushions. 3 months later, Feels Like Better had a deed. We held a tiny ribbon cutting, with ribbons cut from old project printouts. Aunt Corinne brought a fern that looked judgmental in a loving way. Dr. Levitt mailed a card that said, When you're ready, we want phase 2. Adina sent a small brass key in an envelope with a note. Your grandmother would have insisted on a bowl by the door for these. We put a bowl by the door. Nale, I saw Serena once before she left. She asked for coffee at a place downtown with tables made from reclaimed wood and the kind of quiet that lets apologies find their shape. She arrived in scrubs with a sweatshirt thrown over them, hair in a messy bun that made her look like a human instead of an advertisement. We stood awkwardly until she laughed once in that tiny way you do when you're trying to disarm a bomb. Water? She asked. Before coffee? Yes, I said. Always. We talked like people using our first language again, but carefully, like we remembered we once bit each other with it. She told me about anatomy lab smells, and the first time she sutured real skin, and the way a code blue can change the shape of a day. I told her about consent language and an old textile building that had to be convinced to stop complaining. I'm scared, she said softly, a doctor confessing to a person who refused to call her a superhero. Good, I said. You'll respect the work. We didn't touch history. We didn't touch the trust. We let the present pay the bill. When we stood to leave, she said, I'll text if anything matters, and I said, please do. And it wasn't a truce so much as the possibility of one later. The day we moved into the new studio, the power went out in a storm that turned the city into a watercolor. We opened the tall windows and worked by daylight. The team assembled desks like a small army of very competent ants. Theo made a playlist called We Have a Roof, and it was terrible and perfect. When the lights came back on, someone, Mina, yelled, We did it! And someone else, Kay, cried and blamed the fern. That night, I stood in the empty conference room and watched the street. The building hummed in the way old buildings do when they're relieved to be useful again. I held Grandma's letter in my hands and whispered, key, door, like an incantation. It didn't need to be magic. It just needed to be honest. My phone buzzed. A Phoenix number. I answered, a voice I recognized without wanting to. Vivian. No hello, no preamble. Your sister's in surgery, she said, words clipped. Appendix, routine. She told the resident on duty not to call us. She told him to call you. For a moment, I heard nothing but the sound of the building breathing. Which hospital? I asked. Vivian exhaled, broken glass and satin. She told me. She said you would know what to say if she woke up scared. I will, I said, and ended the call before we both said things we couldn't take back. I stared at the rain-streaked glass. Theo stepped into the doorway, silent, already picking up his keys. Airport, he asked. Airport, I said. We locked the door. The bowl by the entrance glinted. I dropped the brass key into it and smiled at the sound it made. Riley, my mother said again, softer, trying to fold my name back into a narrative she owned. Come with us. We'll talk in private. Private is where you put things you don't want to be real, I said, keeping my voice low enough that only our small circle heard. We've been private for 5 years. I learned to breathe in public. Serena's eyes flicked over me, inventorying details like a doctor. Hydrated, steady, dressed like someone who knew where she was going. Why are you here? Her tone was clinical, with a frosting of surprise. To congratulate you, I said, and meant it. And to stop the lies. What lies? Charles asked, a smile still pasted on like a safety label. The ones where your older daughter is abroad, I said. The ones where you're proud of me, in theory, because it makes you look good in practice. The smile faltered. Around us, sound thinned. People have a sixth sense for cracks in the surface. Marion had followed me in from the balcony, concern tightening her mouth. She stood at the edge of our circle, a witness without knowing she'd been cast as one. Charles, she said carefully, you told me Riley couldn't make it tonight because she was in Paris. Looks like a direct flight, Theo murmured as he slid to my shoulder. He had swapped his blazer for a pocket square, somewhere between Durham and Richmond, and wore the kind of calm that pulled eyes without waving for them. Hi, Vivian, Charles, congrats, Serena, big night. My father's gaze darted from me to Theo and back. And you are? Theo Ramirez, he said, offering a hand my father didn't take. Riley's business partner. We build the things she's allegedly doing overseas, mostly from Durham. Vivian regained her footing. This is neither the time nor the place. You said that when I asked for help, I said. And every time I asked for honesty. Your clock is very convenient. A throat cleared behind us. Forgive me. Is everything all right? The man wore an easy suit that had seen rooms like this for decades. I knew his face from brochures. Dr. Levitt, dean of the med school. Professor Marino stood beside him, expression somewhere between wary and maternal pride. Dr. Levitt looked at me with gentle curiosity. I don't believe we've met, I offered my hand. Riley Hart. His eyes flicked to Charles, then back to me. To his credit, he didn't hide his confusion. Ah, Dr. Levitt, my mother began smoothly. You know how families are. We do, he said. In my experience, clarity is a kindness. Then let's be kind, I said. I kept my voice even, my posture relaxed. I wasn't interested in a performance. I was interested in light. You've been told I'm working overseas. I am not. I live in Durham. I run Feels Like Better Studio with Theo. We design brands and products for hospitals, bakeries, schools, and anyone else who needs their services to tell the truth. My parents haven't spoken to me in 5 years. A ripple moved through the cluster of listeners. Not a gasp. More like fabric shifting as people turned to hear. Charles stepped forward, palm open like a benediction. Riley is exaggerating. Am I? I took my phone from my pocket, opened my voice memos, and scrolled to the clip I had just named Hallway, Serena. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lift my hand higher than my chest. I simply pressed play and let my sister's voice enter the room like a draft under a door. I'm handling it. No one's asked about her. Everyone believes the overseas story. Since she dropped out and cut contact, we can reallocate her portion. The will language is flexible if we document abandonment. Serena's voice is beautiful when she sings in a choir. In a recording, it sounded like a polished scalpel. I stopped the clip before the last line because mercy should have teeth, not fangs. The circle was very quiet. The hallway, Serena said, strangled. You were... Why would you? Because you were stealing from me, I said softly. And because you turned me into a convenient myth. Vivian's hands shook. She pressed them together like prayer, and professionalism could make a new god. We did not steal. We asked counsel what was possible. That's a line you can try in front of a judge, Theo said. I'm not certain you'll enjoy the notes he gives. Dr. Levitt exhaled. Ms. Hart, he said to me, voice even, I'm sorry you're dealing with this tonight. It is, indeed, Serena's celebration. I would like to keep it so, if we can. I would too, I said, and I meant it. Serena did the work. That belongs to her. I am not here to ruin a culmination. I am here to correct a premise. Professor Marino's gaze softened. Riley, would you step with me and Dr. Levitt to the side for a moment? 5 minutes. No spectacle. I looked at my parents. Charles's jaw was iron. Vivian's eyes shone with unshed tears that felt selected for the occasion. Serena stared at the carpet like she could calculate a clean incision point for this moment. 5 minutes, I said, and followed. We moved into the thin slice of space between ballroom and foyer, where the sound was mostly light and glass. Theo stayed close. Marion lingered, then wisely drifted away. I don't want to intrude into your family's decisions, Dr. Levitt said, but I can't pretend I didn't just hear what I heard. I don't need you to adjudicate, I said. I need you to know that if my name comes up in connection with this institution, it is on my terms. I don't allow my parents to borrow my work like jewelry. Understood, he said. You have my word this school will not be part of any, reallocation of truth. Professor Marino's eyes glinted. Also, Riley, if you're amenable, I'd like to connect you with our visualization lab director. We could use a designer who thinks like you do. Later, when all this is not happening in a tuxedo. Theo grinned. We do healthcare. We make portals that don't make people cry. Dr. Levitt smiled despite himself. Send me a deck Monday. Deal, I said. It felt delicious to make a business plan with my family 15 feet away, melting their image. Charles appeared at the edge of our small huddle, with Vivian and Serena flanking him like punctuation. He'd recovered enough to sound reasonable. Riley, he said, we can discuss the trust privately with Donald on Monday. Donald can meet Marcus tomorrow at 9, I said. You can bring the original trust documents Grandma Eleanor executed. You can bring anything your counsel thinks makes you look less like thieves. You can sign a no-contact agreement and a statement of truth about the last 5 years. Vivian blinked. No contact agreement. You taught me love was conditional, I said. This is one of the conditions now. Riley, Serena said, voice human for the first time. It made me look at her fully. Her lipstick had bled the tiniest bit at the corner, an angle of imperfection no one else would notice. Can we talk? Just us. 5 years is a long time to be someone's sister and not be their friend. 5 minutes is enough to choose which you will try to be. Outside, I said. Now. We stepped onto the balcony again. The night had changed the city's mood. The river was a darker thread, the buildings a little more honest about their edges. I stood with my spine against the stone and waited. I didn't mean for it to sound like that, she said. It sounded like it sounded, I said. Sounds tell on us. You left, she said, and it was the voice of a girl at a door, not a doctor in a white dress. You left me with them. I was not a safety device you didn't have to install, I said. I was drowning, Serena. Silence inhaled and exhaled between us. They said you would always be the one who bent, she said finally. I believed them. It was easier. Easier is expensive, but I said. You're paying now. A fragile thing trembled through her posture, then hardened. The trust. Mom said Grandma wanted us to be stewards. You dropped out. You disappeared. I thought, if I had that money, I could. She faltered. I could pay off loans. I could do something good. You can still do good, I said. Just not with what belongs to me. That's not. She bit her lip. You have money now. Your studio. People whisper about it like it's magic. Why do you need? Because it is mine, I said. Because I lived on couches and rice and panic while you practiced sutures on orange peels. Because need is not how wills work, and want is not how love does either. She stared at her shoes, which had never walked through Durham mud. I miss the way we were, she said quietly. The way we were, I said, included me doing your chemistry homework once because you were tired and Mom thinking that was proof I would never amount to more than a helper. The way we were didn't have room for me to exist. She looked up, and there it was. The moral math that medicine teaches you. Inputs, outputs, triage. I'm sorry, she said, and for a blink it sounded like the kind of sorry that could grow a new tree out of burned ground. If it matters, I said, and my throat worked hard to let the words through. I am proud of you. Something in her face cracked. It matters, she whispered. We're not friends, I said, not unkindly. We might be sisters again someday if we both do work we don't yet know how to do. She nodded like an intern told to scrub in later. Tomorrow, she said, we'll be there. Bring honesty, I said. Marcus prefers it to theater. When we returned to the ballroom, my father had reassembled his smile and my mother had repaired her mascara. The crowd had reflowed around the stage, like water around a sandbag. The quartet picked up a brisk allegro, as if music could cut tension into swallowable pieces. I didn't go back to the center. I didn't need to. I stood at the edge and raised my glass a little when Serena's eyes found me across the room. She blinked, once, like a signal. Theo leaned in. Marcus is 5 minutes out. He says he can be a shadow in the lobby in case anyone decides to escalate. Let's not give them that scene, I said. He bumped my shoulder with his. Proud of you. Hungry, I said, because my body had finally finished the panic marathon and realized it needed soup. Is there a late-night place in Richmond that looks at you and says, we've seen things? Diner on Broad, Theo said. Neon sign, cracked booths, pancakes that forgive sins. Sold, I said. 2 pancakes and a lawyer. We headed for the exit through the cloud of cologne and success. As we crossed the lobby, Professor Marino detoured to press a card into my hand. Deck Monday, she said. And it's good to see your lines found a home. In the revolving door, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Outside, the night pressed cool palms to my cheeks. Marcus was waiting by a planter, tie loosened, eyes amused. From the texts, I expected blood, he said. You left them their faces. I left Serena her night, I said. Vivian and Charles can practice humility in the mirror. Marcus nodded. You have the recording? I handed him my phone. He listened with his head tilted like a man appraising a painting. This is clean, he said. Intent, mechanics, motive. We'll send a preservation letter tonight and a demand in the morning. 9 a.m. in my office. Bring ID, original copies of any trust paperwork you've got. I'll pull Grandma Eleanor's will from Fairfax County records. Theo rubbed his hands. And pancakes. We slid into a booth that had heard more confessions than a cathedral. The waitress poured coffee like she meant it. Theo ordered enough breakfast for a softball team. Marcus asked for toast because he was a responsible adult even at midnight. I watched syrup turn amber in the light and felt my hands finally stop shaking. Question, Marcus said, buttering like a surgeon. What do you want beyond the trust? A public statement? A private apology? No contact, I assume. Yes to no contact, I said. A written statement on letterhead that they disowned me and have misrepresented my life. No criminal charges. If they sign quickly, if they don't. I took a breath that tasted like coffee and closure. I go scorched earth in a very curated, well-designed way. Theo raised his mug. To curated justice. We clinked. Marcus smiled. I'll craft an agreement that would make a judge nod. We give them 48 hours. After that, we file, and we let sunlight do what it does. What if they try to PR their way out? I asked. Marcus laughed softly. If reputation is their god, you just became a theologian. We ate, we planned. We left a tip that felt like gratitude for a place that feeds the wrecked. Back at the hotel, Theo had booked me a room before I could argue. My phone showed the voicemail. I played it on speaker while kicking off my shoes. Riley, Vivian's voice said, stretched thin. We'll meet. Donald will call. Please, don't make a scene. This is Serena's night. I deleted it. The night had already decided what it wanted to be. I slept like someone who had finally put the right name on a folder. Morning smelled like coffee from the lobby and the paper bag Theo shoved into my hand. A biscuit big enough to stop a heart and orange slices to apologize for it. We drove to Marcus's office in Shaco's slip, brick and steel, and glass pretending to be friends. Marcus spread files like a magician laying out cards. Grandma Eleanor was meticulous, he said, tapping a highlighted clause. Equal trusts for both granddaughters. No conditions tied to education, residence, or familial contact. Annual statements were supposed to be mailed to you at 18 and 25. Did you receive any? No, I said. Vivian got the mail back then. When I was 25, I lived in 3 places and a car in one of those months. He nodded. We'll add that to the demand. Failure to provide required statements. Increases damages if we go to court. Theo whistled low. They are going to hate that word. Marcus drafted with the efficiency of a man who had set a lot of bones. The demand included immediate handover of all trust documentation, transfer of trustee powers to an independent fiduciary within 7 business days, a written admission of disinheritance and misrepresentation, a mutual non-disparagement clause, and a no-contact agreement enforceable by injunction. It also included a paragraph written in a very polite font about the recording and our willingness to share it with interested parties if cooperation faltered. When Donald called at 8:59 on the dot, Marcus put him on speaker. Good morning, Donald said, voice smooth as a paperweight. My clients are willing to meet. They are distressed. They can be distressed in my conference room at 9:30, Marcus said. I'll email terms, counsel to counsel from here on. Of course, Donald said. And Riley, Miss Hart, your timing last night was unfortunate. The truth is inconvenient in most rooms, I said. See you at 9:30. We hung up. I stared at the windows until the city arranged itself into a pattern I liked. Theo set a cup of water in front of me like it was a small spell. We keep the temperature low, he said. No big speeches, in sign, out. Under 15 minutes, Marcus said. That's the goal. At 9:31, Vivian and Charles walked in with Donald. Serena trailed them, not quite on their step, like part of her had stayed on that balcony. Vivian's eyes were the stubborn kind of red. Charles had brought his composure in a briefcase and opened it on the table. Donald smiled like a dentist about to discuss flossing. Thank you for meeting, Marcus said, and his voice changed. Cool, professional, bored by drama. You've reviewed the terms. We have comments, Donald began. You have history, Marcus said. The terms stand. This no contact, Vivian said. Permanently? Permanently, I said. Your daughter who bent doesn't live here anymore. Serena looked at the papers. What about holidays? Birthdays? She asked, like we were ordering from a menu. You can mail whatever you need to mail to Marcus, I said. He'll decide. Donald tried again. The admission. Could we frame it as a misunderstanding? The recording frames it, Marcus said. The admission just tells the truth. Silence, measured in seconds and a lifetime. Charles picked up the pen. He signed with a hand that had shaken 1,000 hands. He pushed the pages to Vivian. She signed like every letter had bones. Serena signed where her name appeared as contingent beneficiary in a subclause Grandma Eleanor had written for matters of incapacity or absences of one granddaughter. It stung, and then it didn't. When they were done, Marcus stacked the pages, slid copies across, and said, We'll be in touch regarding transfer logistics. If we don't receive full cooperation within 7 business days, we file. Donald nodded. Understood. Charles stood. Riley, he said, and my name sounded like a language he hadn't practiced in years. We hope you'll be happy. I already am, I said. I just prefer definitions that don't require witnesses. They left. Serena lingered a heartbeat longer, eyes meeting mine. It wasn't a truce, it was a map. She tapped the table, once, like a metronome for a song she didn't yet know, and then she was gone. Marcus exhaled. I've had uglier mornings, he said. You behave like someone who intends to sleep tonight. I do, I said, surprised by how true it felt. Theo clapped once, quiet, the way you do when you don't want to startle a miracle. Breakfast number 2. God, yes, I said. And then I have a staff meeting at 2 where I will not cry. On the drive back, my phone buzzed with texts from numbers that had slept through my life and woken up wanting to apologize. I ignored them. One message made me smile, though. Professor Marino sent a calendar invite titled Lab XFLB Kickoff for Monday at 10 hours. The description said, "We make the invisible visible." I tapped accept. By evening, Marcus had a confirmation email from the bank. Trusteeship transfer initiated. By morning, an independent fiduciary had called me, calm voice, strong passwords, to introduce herself and outline next steps. By the end of the week, the first official statement from Grandma Eleanor's trust arrived in my inbox. The number made my chest ache, not because of what I could buy, because of what I had built without it and what I could build with it now. I drove to Eno River State Park before dawn, a thermos of coffee in my cup holder, and Mabel in the passenger seat, acting like a furry moral support animal. We reached the water as the sun slid a coin of light under the horizon. I stood on the rocks and said, "Grandma, I'm going to be a good steward." The river didn't answer, but a heron lifted out of the fog like an exclamation point. On Monday, I walked into the med school's visualization lab with Theo and Mina and a deck full of ways to make anatomy talk. Dr. Levitt shook my hand like nothing strange had happened at a ballroom. Professionals choose the room they bring with them. We showed them a patient intake flow that made sense to exhausted brains and a set of interactive lungs that did the right kind of breathing. They said yes. We got to work. Word does what word does. Back in Arlington, my parents' friends stopped calling, not dramatically, but decisively, the way you put a plate in the wrong cabinet once and never do it again. In Richmond, Marion sent a text that simply read, "Take good care. They will learn something. I hope it is the right thing." Serena started a residency search that didn't include institutions where people had been in that ballroom. She ended up matching to a hospital in Phoenix. Distance is sometimes a surgeon, too. I didn't check my parents' socials. I didn't look for apologies. I didn't plot revenge schedules. I painted the studio's back wall with a quote Mina brought in on a sticky note. "We don't fix the world. We make tools for people who do." On a Tuesday afternoon, a week after the party, I opened the studio fridge and found a post-it on the oat milk. "You did a hard thing." Below it, a crude drawing of a heron. Theo, obviously. I stuck it on my monitor frame where it caught the light. That night I went home, cooked something simple, and ate it at my table, with my shoes off and my windows open. Durham moved past like a friendly river. Mabel snored. Peace made its quiet case. I slept. I slept on couches in Alexandria, then in a studio above a pizza place in Hyattsville that smelled like dough at dawn and oregano at midnight. I worked shifts that forgot my name. Retail, late-night office cleaning, hostessing in a bistro where my feet blistered and my smile never reached my eyes. I learned which metro station bathrooms were passable and how far you could stretch rice and peanut butter. Depression is a city that looks like yours, but none of the streets lead home. I kept a sketchbook anyway. Lines were the only thing that obeyed me. My brain would fog, then clear just long enough to make a mark. One night, I found a free tutorial on vector tools and stayed up until the birds. The next day, I designed a logo for a friend's band in exchange for gas money. It felt like a pulse. When the landlord raised the rent, I moved again, south to Durham, North Carolina, because a friend from high school, Jay, texted a photo of a spare room with a window full of trees and said, "You can have it if you can handle rent and my dog." I could, and I could. The dog, a basset with judgmental eyes named Mabel, decided I belonged when I let her sleep on my feet while I edited a flyer for a food truck. Days were a braid of survival and practice. I waited tables at a place that served burgers, blessed by Duke students' parents. I did inventory at a small design shop with letterpresses that looked like they could get up and walk away. Nights, I clicked through courses and forums, pausing to sketch something that looked like hope. I emailed micro-businesses with a pitch that was more prayer than plan. "I'll design your logo and a one-page site for $150. 2-week turnaround, revisions included, pay what you can." Most ignored me. Some said yes. The first time a hairstylist named Tasha Venable paid me in cash, wrapped in a napkin, and hugged me until my ribs complained, I went home and taped the napkin to my wall like a diploma. I called a clinic about sliding scale therapy after a day I couldn't stop crying in the frozen produce aisle. "We can get you in 2 weeks from Thursday," the woman said, gentle, like she knew what it cost to make that call. I wrote the date on my arm because paper could get lost. 2 weeks later, I sat on a blue couch and told a stranger I didn't think I could be the person everyone wanted. She said, "Let's find out who you want." I cried until I laughed. Mabel snored on my feet. I didn't talk to my family. I changed my number. I told Jay to ignore any messages from Arlington. Once, late, I searched Serena on Instagram and found a life filtered to glow. Med school in Boston, a boyfriend in tailored jackets, parents, and photos like a luxury brand. I closed the app and went back to kerning. The first big break arrived in a cardboard box. A Durham bakery with lines down the block wanted new packaging, and the owner, Rochelle, had seen Tasha's logo on a sandwich board. "I can't pay full agency rates," Rochelle said, "but I can pay real money, and you can take as many cupcakes as you want." I sat on a flour-dusted stool and sketched while she proofed dough and told me stories about her grandmother's butter. When I showed her a mark, 2 hands cupping a son that was also a yolk, she put the pen down and said, "That feels like love." We printed that on boxes the color of early morning. People posted photos, orders doubled, more calls came, a mural for a youth center, event branding for a nonprofit gala that needed to feel like hope and not like homework. A university wanted workshop posters that looked like energy in motion. I raised my rates by a tiny, terrified amount. No one blinked. The day I filed the LLC paperwork in a coffee shop off 9th Street, Jay slid a candle across the table and sang a quiet, off-key, "Happy LLC to you." Mabel stole the candle top and chewed it under a chair. I laughed hard enough that the barista smiled at us and said, "Looks like a new business is born." It needed a name. I wrote 50 possibilities on sticky notes and hated them all. Later at the clinic, my therapist asked, "When did you feel most like yourself this week?" I told her about Rochelle saying, "That feels like love." "Then call your company the thing you're trying to make," she said. That night, I bought the domain Feels Like Better Studio. It made me laugh. It made sense. I learned about retainers, about calendars that eat you if you don't feed them, about the terrible, holy art of saying no. I learned that people will ask for 5 versions when what they need is a hard question. I learned that kindness speeds everything up, except bad faith. I learned that my depression didn't leave. It learned to ride shotgun while I drove. The first time I walked into a proper office, it was because Theo Ramirez, a developer who replied to one of my forum answers with, "You're fast and clean. Want to build something together?" insisted I meet a client in person. "Trust me," he said. "They're flush and flustered. We can fix both." Theo had a grin that could sell weather and a habit of taking notes like he was drawing maps. We clicked in the way people do, who know the same songs of survival. The client, a regional healthcare startup in Raleigh, needed a patient portal that didn't make users cry. While their ops lead apologized for their current UI, I asked the questions I had trained myself to ask when lines alone couldn't fix a thing. What's the job this screen needs to accomplish? What do patients need to feel when they see this? What's the cost if they feel the wrong thing? I drew on a whiteboard until the room exhaled. They signed. It was the first contract that felt like the room would stop being so loud. 6 months later, Theo and I were partners in a studio with a door that locked, plants that refused to die, and a whiteboard full of yes. We hired Kay, then Mina, then Dev. We kept a jar labeled Good Soup, where we put sticky notes for tiny wins. Rochelle cried again. Portal load time down 37%. Kay's mom liked our billboard. When the jar filled, we took it down the block for burgers and read them out loud. The thing about building something out of nothing is that you become a person, the old you would not recognize. I woke before alarms. I ate because work wanted me fed. I kept therapy on the calendar like oxygen. I started running in the mornings, slowly, Mabel waddling along, both of us proud of ourselves for showing up. When my inbox flashed a message from a name I hadn't thought. About in years, I almost deleted it. The sender was Elise Murphy, a girl who used to sit 3 lunch tables away and braid her hair so tight it looked like a design choice. "Riley?" This might be weird, but your sister's graduation party is next Saturday at the Peabody in downtown Richmond. I picked up a shift and saw the invite list. I know you and your family aren't in touch. If you want to come, I can put you on the vendor list. No pressure. Just thought you might want to know. I stared so hard the letters looked like static. Serena, graduating med school. Of course she was. Of course my parents would rent chandeliers to prove it. The part of me that stayed 14 and wanted to be chosen felt something like a bruise. The part of me who ran a studio and paid salaries and could explain the difference between a gradient and a decision felt nothing but weather. It would be easy not to go. It would be smarter not to go. I could spend Saturday morning at the Eno River, watch the light fold itself into water, forget Arlington ever existed, and come home to the good kind of tired. I could keep my life clean and simple and intact. I could avoid the old gravity. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the porch light slashing the dark and heard the door hit like a gavel. Around 3 a.m., I got up and made a list, because lists are what I do when feelings try to run the meeting. Reasons to go? Not to be chosen, to choose. To look them in the eyes as a person I built. To see what story they tell about the daughter they threw away. To learn what I don't know. There is always something I don't know. Reasons not to go. Pain, panic, old scripts with teeth. They will pretend I am the problem. They are very good at this. It could cost me a week of sleep and a month of scars. I took the list to therapy. What does going cost? My therapist asked. What does staying cost? We sat in that question until the hour was done. On my way out, she said, if you go, go for you. The room does not get to define it. I texted Theo. Thinking about attending a family thing could be messy. He replied instantly. Want a shadow or a getaway car? I am equally good at both. I told Elise yes. The week leading up to the party felt like walking with a stone in my shoe. Work was busy. An app launch, 2 brand directions due, an onboarding flow that wanted to be a labyrinth. But every spare corner of my brain filled with flashes of Serena's laugh and my mother's perfume and my father's handshake that could make you feel like either a prince or an invoice. I picked an outfit the way I pick typography. Simple, intentional, not trying too hard to impress. Black dress, clean lines, pockets big enough for my phone and a pen. Before I left, I opened the box of things I'd kept in spite of everything. An old summer camp photo where we both ate popsicles, a program from a high school play, where I'd done the set design and my parents had left after Serena's solo. I took nothing from the box. I told the photo, I'm not going to vanish this time, and put the lid back on. The Peabody's ballroom shone like a promise built with other people's money. Crystal dripped from the chandeliers. White flowers argued with gravity on every table. A string quartet played the kind of Vivaldi that sounds like silverware. Servers carried champagne like it was a solution. I stood at the edge of it all and let the old panic wash over me and ebb, like a wave that realized the coast had changed. No one noticed me at first. 5 years is enough time to learn new bones. I was thinner now, sharper around the edges, more certain of where my body belonged in space. I moved to the bar and ordered seltzer with lime because I needed my head. The bartender nodded like he could tell I was running a program. I recognized faces. Aunties who called you sweetie until you disappointed them. Men who played golf like it was a language. They were older and gleaming. The conversation hum had the texture of brag, softened by champagne. In the middle of it all stood Serena Hart. White dress, perfect posture, a smile with medical authority. Beside her, my parents beamed. That specific light people glow when they've convinced themselves they are benevolent gods. A voice to my left. Riley Hart? I turned and blinked. Professor Marino? She taught first-year design at UVA, the only professor who had circled my sketch of a narrow row house and written, "You see structure like a story." We hugged awkwardly, like same-city strangers who suddenly share the same dream. What are you doing at a med school party? I asked. I married one, she said, grinning. He teaches anatomy now. I consult on the med school's visualization lab sometimes. She studied me. I heard you left. I always wondered what happened to your lines. They're still here, I said, tapping my temple and then my pocket. I run a small studio in Durham. We build brands and products that behave. Her eyes warmed. Of course you do. We traded summaries, the way people do, each sentence a small bridge. When she excused herself to go say hello to Serena, she was on a panel I moderated last year. I watched the room rearrange itself around the people who believed it belonged to them. I drifted. I listened. I took notes on my phone because that's what I do when I am collecting the shape of a problem. I kept hearing my name in other people's mouths, but not my name. Not exactly. Our older daughter is overseas a lot, my father told a woman dripping jewels. Impossible schedule. My mother added, she's doing something with design. Very international. We're so proud. A man I didn't know said, 2 stellar daughters. How do you do it? And my mother laughed like humility and said, we just set high expectations. I sipped my seltzer and watched a story I did not recognize wrap itself around my absence like tulle. They had turned me into a pleasant rumor. The lie walked in heels and smelled like citrus. People nodded along because it was easier than asking what hurt. I slipped out onto the balcony because the air inside was too perfumed to carry truth. Richmond glittered, the James River a dark seam through the city. I placed both palms on the cool stone rail and breathed until my chest stopped arguing. Needed a breather? A woman asked, voice warm. She was maybe 50, hair silver like she'd chosen it, dressed the blue of a perfect 4 o'clock. She smiled the kind of smile that earns confidences. I'm Marion. I work with your dad sometimes. He never shuts up about his girls. I made a neutral sound that could read as fondness. Marion studied my face. You look familiar. Have we met? I don't think so, I said, careful. No, I'm sure. Oh. Her eyes widened. You're Riley. He showed me a portfolio on his phone last month. Beautiful work. That campaign with the hands in the sun. He said you designed it. The bakery boxes. Rochelle's boxes. I chose my next breath very carefully. That's surprising, I said. My father isn't usually a fan. Oh, he's so proud, she said. He says you're abroad a lot, but he keeps photos of your projects on his home office shelves. There are lies. And then there are lies with interior decorators. I felt something cold and precise form in my chest. Pride was always easier to perform than love. Excuse me, I said, and left before the rage could teach my tongue new words. Back inside, the room had shifted toward the small stage at the far end. My father held a microphone like an old friend. I hung back where the ballroom spilled into the foyer and braced for the myth. Good evening, he said, baritone smoothing the edges. Thank you for joining us to celebrate an extraordinary milestone. Our Serena has worked with a discipline and heart that humbles us. Tonight is for her. Applause rolled across the room. I saw Serena's chin lift half an inch as if to meet the wave. As parents, he continued, there's nothing better than watching your children become themselves. Vivian and I have been blessed with 2 remarkable daughters. Serena, who we honor tonight, and our elder, Riley, who can't be here due to international commitments. She's built a design firm with clients across the map. We're proud of both our girls. Family is everything. I laughed, a small sound that tasted like steel. 2 people near me looked over, then away. In that moment, I realized I wasn't there for them or for the speech or even for Serena. I was there for a ledger I had been afraid to open. I moved toward the hallway that led to the coat check and the private rooms. Parties hide their most honest moments in corridors. Midway down, I saw Serena step into a small conference room, phone to her ear, edge to her voice. The door didn't latch. I'm handling it, she said, low. No, Mom, no one's asked about her. Everyone believes the overseas story. Even Dr. Patel nodded along. A pause. Then Serena again, this time with a laugh that I knew too well. If she shows up, Riley doesn't even know about the party. We didn't invite her. She won't come back after 5 years. She never had the stomach for hard things. Slowly, I slipped my phone into record and held it near the crack of the door. About the trust, Serena murmured. Yes. I talked to Donald. Since she dropped out and cut contact, we can push to reallocate her portion. The will language is flexible if we document abandonment. It'll take filings, but it's doable. Silence. Then my sister's voice again, soft and vicious. She made her choices. That money is better off supporting someone who didn't throw everything away. My hand shook. The phone did not. When she hung up, I stepped back into the soft noise of the hallway and leaned my head against the cool plaster until my breath returned. The anger was clean now. It had edges and a job. I texted Theo. Change of plan, I'm staying, might need you later. Also, call Marcus, the lawyer. He replied. Already did. He's on standby. Proud of you. I slid my phone into my pocket and walked back toward the ballroom. The quartet shifted into something bright. A server nearly collided with me, murmured, sorry, offered a tray. I took a champagne and let the bubbles bite. If my parents were going to build a myth out of my absence, I was going to write the footnote in a font no one could ignore. I didn't rush. I took another lap as if I were a designer assessing flow. I let my heartbeat fall into time with the room. When I was as calm as I was going to get, I stepped into the periphery of their circle. Up close, my mother's dress looked like money taught to shimmer. My father's smile tightened a millimeter when he saw me. Serena's eyes narrowed with the speed of recognition you develop when your life has been curated. "Hello, Mother," I said. "Hello, Father. Serena." For a moment, none of us remembered the script. Vivian recovered first. "Riley," she breathed. "What are you doing here?" "Being honest," I said, and watched the word land like a dropped glass. I didn't say the rest. Not yet. There was a room to read, and I'm a designer. I know how to navigate an audience. I know when to let silence do the talking and when to break it cleanly in two. I raised my champagne. "Congratulations, Serena," I said. "You did the work. That matters." Her mouth opened like maybe a thank you might find it. It didn't. Not yet. We were still inside the room my parents had arranged. We were about to open a door that didn't know it could be opened. I was no longer the girl on the porch. I was the woman with the key. We were at the airport in 40 minutes because the sky and the lights and the traffic decided to be generous all at once. Theo drove like a person who believes in speed limits but negotiates with them. On the way, he booked 2 seats on the last direct to Phoenix, texted the airline app, and talked to the gate agent like a friend he hadn't met yet. "I can buy a ticket and my manners will do the upgrade," he said, grinning at me sideways. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, because people who aren't fine say that first. My hands were steady. My head felt like a room someone had just cleaned. At security, the agent glanced at our IDs and then at my face like she wanted to ask if I was all right, but remembered she didn't have the time. When we reached the gate, a woman in a navy blazer looked up, saw Theo's "I can charm the moon" expression, and smiled like she wanted to be part of whatever show we were bringing. "2 to Phoenix," he said. "Sister in surgery. We're very good at sitting quietly." She moved us to the front of the section that boards early and whispered, "I'll tell the flight crew." People do this. They make room around the shape of urgency without needing your whole story. We didn't talk on the runway. We took off. The black outside the window did what black does. I watched a blinking light on the wing and breathed in for 4 counts, out for 6. The man across the aisle snored like a metronome with opinions. Mid-air, Theo passed me his phone. He had pulled the hospital listing up. Valley General Medical Center, Phoenix, surgeons, visiting hours, the tiny line under informed consent. That link to PDFs with text so small it looked like punishment. I pinched to zoom and laughed once, unkindly. "This is why we make what we make," Theo said softly. I opened Serena's last text again. "They're taking me down. If I don't reply, I'm drugged. Please just be there when it's over." No exclamation points, no flourishes, just a request that felt like a key, turning in a door I hadn't trusted to stay unlocked. When the flight attendant came by with water and peanuts, Theo said, "She likes ginger ale when she's nauseous," which felt like a piece of history he shouldn't know, but did because sisters do the same things in different houses. "How do you know that?" I asked. "You do," he said. "You reach for ginger when your stomach is a fist. People are more consistent than they think." He squeezed the back of my hand once, quick, like a period. "I'm here." I slept in 10-minute slips, that shallow stage where you dream your own thoughts. I woke when the wheels kissed the runway and the cabin lights came up like mercy. Phoenix air at midnight is a complicated temperature. It smells like dust and neon and a far-off rain that has changed its mind. We collected a rental car that hummed with newness and drove through straight roads that felt like they'd been drawn with a ruler. Valley General's ER entrance was lit like a daylight nobody asked for. Signs shouted directions in fonts picked by committee. The security guard at the desk had a patient kindness and a badge that said, June. I told her my name, Serena's, the word, sister. She checked the screen and nodded. "You're listed as emergency contact," she said. "Appendectomy, laparoscopic, she's still in the OR. You can wait in the surgical lounge, down the hall, left, then right at the bakery that closes at 9, but smells like 10. "Thank you," I said, and meant it as a full sentence. The surgical lounge looked like all rooms everyone waits in eventually. Beige that thinks beige is nonpartisan, chairs that know how to be a shoulder, a TV tuned to weather with the sound off, a bulletin board with a flyer about grief groups and one about avoiding high-interest credit cards. We sat. Theo handed me a styrofoam cup of something hot that tasted like coffee in the way a sketch tastes like a city. At the whiteboard, a volunteer wrote case numbers and status in dry erase blue. Every 15 minutes, she glanced up at the clock like it might change policy. A family of 4 slept in a pile in the corner, shoelaces and hoodie sleeves a bird's nest. A man in a suit paced across the room on a call that kept trying to hurt him. Someone in scrubs came in and announced, "For Rodriguez," and half the room lifted its head. I thought about consent screens. I thought about Grandma's letter. I thought about the bowl of keys. Theo said nothing for a long time, which is one of the reasons he is my person. Then casually, "Do your parents know?" "They called me," I said. I didn't call back. "You don't owe them the bolt of lightning," he said. "They can live with the thunder after." I nodded. "If Serena wants them updated, I'll ask the nurse to call." We waited. Waiting is its own math. Time divides itself into fractions, then refuses to be added back. At some point, a nurse in navy scrubs with a ponytail came in with a clipboard. "Family for heart." I stood. "Sister." She smiled that efficient comfort nurses carry like muscle memory. "I'm Kira. She's in recovery. Dr. Cho will come by after he finishes dictation. Surgery went well. Routine laparoscopic. We want to keep her overnight because her blood pressure ran low before we got it up again. Common. Annoying. Fixable." "Is she awake?" I asked. "Coming up out of anesthesia," Kira said. "She asked for Riley as soon as she could form a vowel. You must be very good at ginger ale." Theo made a choking noise that might have been a laugh. We followed Kira down a hall that smelled like disinfectant and sadness and fresh linen. We passed a wall sign that told you how to get to imaging in 5 steps that would have taken a pilot to follow. I made a note in my head to send Dr. Levitt a photo with a caption, "Let us fix this everywhere, please." In recovery, Serena looked small because everyone looks small with monitors arguing beside them. She had the oxygen tubing in her nose and that post-op pallor that can make a face look like it is thinking. As soon as Kira said my name, Serena's eyelids fluttered like a person taking an exam she hadn't studied for. She found my face, and her ribs went less tight. "You came," she said, voice gravel, edges softened by the drugs. "Obviously," I said. Kira adjusted a drip, tidied a line. "We're going to get her to a room in about 20. You can stay for 5 now." "Stay," Serena said, not a question. I pulled the vinyl chair close and rested my forearms on the bed, so the distance felt like a choice and not an order. Theo hung back by the curtain, presence without pressure. "How are you?" I asked, because some habits are helpful. "Hate this hospital gown," she said. "Love morphine." Felt like a washing machine for a minute. Then, floaty. "Did I text you something weird before they took me?" "You said please," I said, which is my favorite kind of weird. "Don't tell the residents," she murmured. "They think I'm a knife." "Knives are tools," I said. "Grandma says keys are better." She smiled. It looked like a wince. "Is Mom calling you?" "She can call the nurse's station," I said. "Do you want me to have them update her?" Serena blinked slowly, the way brains do when they are wrapping gauze around a decision. "Yes," she said, "but not from you. I don't want—" She trailed off. "You know." "I do," I said. Kira returned with a cuff and a tech with a portable vitals monitor that beeped like it had feelings. Numbers appeared. Kira nodded approval at them. "We'll move her soon," she said. "You can meet us upstairs." The 5 minutes were up. Serena closed her eyes, mouth relaxing with permission. I touched the back of her hand with one finger. I left before they had to ask. Theo and I found the nurse's station and asked Kira to call Vivian. She agreed without making it a moral verdict. "We do family, not judgment," she said. "We can leave your name out of it." "Thank you," I said, and thought about putting that sentence on a billboard. Upstairs, Serena's room had a window with a view of a flat roof and a square of desert sky. Night in Phoenix looks like someone forgot to turn the lights off on the horizon. Theo dragged 2 chairs together and made a long seat like a terrible couch. I sat, shoes off, back against the wall, the kind of tired that doesn't fight sleep, and the kind that does. Kira rolled Serena in with a second nurse doing the bed dance, lines and poles and the thin blanket with the weight of a suggestion. They settled her, checked connections, made notes with their eyes, then left with the door half open and the lights half down. "Stay," Serena said. A whisper, from a well. "Of course," I said. Theo lay down on the chair couch and folded his hands on his stomach like a useful vampire. "I'll snore," he announced, then did. Serena drifted under again. Machines kept score. I watched them and her and the sky and realized I wasn't thinking about Arlington for the first time since the phone call. This was the room. This was the job. Everything else could wait its turn. I must have slept because I dreamed my grandmother was counting out change at a diner, nickels clicking like a metronome, and when I opened my eyes, the room had softened from black to a gray that thought about being morning. Serena was watching me. "You look awful," she said conversationally. "You smell like hospital," I said back. We grinned, which tugged at her incisions and made her grimace. I stood up before remembering I was in socks and pretended that was a plan. Kira came in with a tray that had ice chips like diamonds and a little cup of applesauce that had given up on being interesting. "Vitals are good," she said. "Pain is average. Nausea is a diva. We're talking. Let's get you sitting up a bit and then you can try a few sips. Your emergency contact can help." She glanced at me to make sure I heard the word without falling apart. I did. I propped pillows, lifted the head of the bed, learned again how to be hands for someone else's ribs. Serena took a chip of ice like it might have opinions. She swallowed. The monitor kept its rhythm. "You put me down as emergency contact," I said when Kira left. "I did," Serena said. 2 weeks ago. I updated everything before I started nights." "Why?" "You answer the phone," she said, "and you tell the truth." That belonged to both of us for a while. At 8, Dr. Cho came in, hair perfect, hands decisive. He introduced himself to me, then to Serena again, because he's a person who knows time gets weird under anesthesia. He reviewed the procedure with a pen on a paper, like proof existed in lines. "No complications," he said. "Small appendix, angry but polite. We'll have you on your feet by afternoon, discharge tomorrow." "Thank you," Serena said, voice steady now. In that way, doctors learn to keep their own fear in the anteroom. When he left, Sio jerked his chin toward the hallway. "Coffee?" "Please," Serena and I said at the same time. He went to make promises to a machine that did not deserve it. We had an hour together without beeping interruptions. We used it carefully. She asked about the studio. I told her the fern was judging us all equally. She asked about Grandma's letter. I read her the line about keys and doors. She closed her eyes and mouthed the sentence like she was suturing something I couldn't see. "Phoenix is dry," I said. "You need lotion." "I need a nap," she said, "and a life I don't have to apologize for not telling Mom about." "We can't order you that from the nurse's station," I said. "But we can write the manual for it." "What part are you writing?" she asked, eyes still closed. "Boundaries," I said, "with diagrams." She smiled without teeth. "I'll do the section on hydration." Theo came back with coffee and a ginger ale. Serena took a sip and sighed like a cartoon character, seeing pie on a windowsill. We sat in perfect silence long enough for the room to memorize us. 2 things happened before noon. The first, Kira posted a "no visitors except sister" sign on the door because Vivian had called the main switchboard 3 times and tried to get transferred to me. "She'll learn to climb a different wall," Kira said, and winked. The second, an intern wandered in with paperwork for discharge the next day. He had the hurried stare of someone juggling 15 tasks with 2 hands. "Consents in," he said, and put an iPad on Serena's lap. She scrolled and stopped. "Who wrote this?" she asked flatly. "A committee that lost a bet." The screen was dense paragraphs, inconsistent buttons, 3 separate signature fields that didn't say what they were for. It looked like it had been designed by a room of liability fears, not a person who had ever fed a patient Jell-O at 2 a.m. "Don't worry," the intern said. He was young enough that the phrase still sounded like a habit. "You just click through to the end." "Words mean things," Serena said. "Can we give you a note?" I asked. "We designed this sort of thing, not this one, obviously, but ones like it. There are low-lift fixes that would save time and make it safer." The intern blinked at me like I had spoken in orange. "I can tell my attending," he said. He picked up the iPad and fled. "I was polite," I said. That was my polite voice. "I'm proud," Serena said. "I wanted to throw it out the window." Theo opened a note on his phone. "We'll write an email to their patient experience lead. 5 bullet points. No judgment, only wins." We did. We included screenshots from our pilot, anonymized. We used sentences like, "We noticed," and "What if?" We drew a progress bar with labels that told the truth. We ended with, "Happy to share more, if helpful. No obligations, only tools." Kira read it on her break, nodded, and said, "Forward it to Mr. Kravitz, the admin with the eyes." Theo did. We let the work. Around 3, Serena stood up, slowly, carefully. She walked to the window and looked out at the flat roof and the square of sky and said, "I feel like I could hear the desert if the AC wasn't so loud." She sat again and ate 3 spoonfuls of broth like a person learning to trust soup. I texted Aunt Corinne, "Appendix? Fine. Phoenix, your niece is very good at bossing nurses respectfully." She replied with a photo of a tiny cactus in a terracotta pot. Caption: "For her windowsill when she forgets to water everything else." At 5, Kira said, "Shift change," and hugged Serena gently, then me, like she knew touch had politics, and also that we'd earned it. The night nurse, a man named Julian with forearms like promises, took over and immediately fixed the monitor beep nobody had bothered to tame. "Noise is a choice," he said. He told Serena he'd be back in an hour for walking practice. She said, "Fine, Dad." And he laughed like he hadn't heard that one 500 times. I went down to the cafeteria to find food not made of gelatin. Theo stayed with Serena and texted me photos of her making faces at the broth, then a shot of the whiteboard where Julian had written a goal. 2 hallway laps before midnight. It looked like a dare. The cafeteria had the usual suspects and a woman at the register who said, "Long day?" and meant it, and I said, "Long month?" and she gave me a second packet of salt and said, "On me." On the way back, a young couple sat with a baby asleep across both their laps. They were whispering in that way that means, "We are louder on the inside." The mother's eyes were red. The father's hands looked like he wanted to lift something heavy and couldn't. I put 2 ginger ales on their table and said, "From a woman who has done a lot of waiting." The mother said thank you without trying to decline. The father cried once and nodded. "We have all been here." Back upstairs, Serena was midlap. Julian a patient planet beside her. She saw me and raised the IV pole like a baton. The hallway applause was just me and Theo, but she bowed anyway. At 9, the room dimmed, and the hospital noises shifted to the ones that feel like the inside of a clock. Serena drifted. I texted Adina at a wildly unreasonable hour and received an auto reply that said, "I'll read this in the morning and still be awake. Take care." I smiled. Responsible people are my kink. At 10, Vivian called again. The number looked like a house in Arlington. I let it go. My phone buzzed with a voicemail, and I deleted it without listening. The no-contact agreement didn't require me to be heroic. I could be exact. Near midnight, the patient experience lead replied to Theo's email with 3 sentences and a meeting link for the following week. "Thank you. I've been trying to get them to see this. Can you show my team your pilot?" Theo looked at me and waggled his eyebrows. "We might be in Phoenix 2 more days." Around 1, Serena woke and said in the dark, "I'm scared," like she was practicing telling the truth. "Me too," I said. "It doesn't have to be a problem." "What if I hurt someone?" she said. "What if I make the wrong choice fast?" "You will," I said. "You'll make mistakes. You'll also make decisions no one else could have made in time. The point is not to be perfect. The point is to be accountable." She breathed out a small laugh. "You say that like design and medicine share a language." "They do," I said. "We both build things that can break people." "Grandma would hate that sentence," she murmured. "She would," I agreed. She'd also make us write it on note cards and pin it to the fridge. We slept in the strange way people sleep in rooms where machines are more awake than you. Morning peeled itself up over the flat roof. Julian brought better coffee than the hospital had any right to have, and pretended not to be proud of that fact. Kira returned with a smile that looked like sunrise. "Discharged today," she said. "No heavy lifting, no heroics, hydration like it's your job." She looked at me. "And you, try not to design the whole hospital before lunch." "No promises," I said. Serena went home the next afternoon to an apartment with very few chairs and 1 plant that had given up sometime in May. Theo and I set her up with pillows and a lineup of soup and a stack of sticky notes that said things like, "Drink and walk and text me if you need help with your socks." She rolled her eyes and obeyed. That evening, I sat on her balcony while the desert tried to teach me its version of dusk. The sky did colors I don't have words for. Vivian texted me a single period, the kind of punctuation that assumes the rest of the sentence is your job. I did not reply. Theo brought out 2 plastic chairs like a patio fancy restaurant. "We have a meeting tomorrow," he said, "with Mr. Kravitz and 3 people who look like they haven't slept since 2019. You up for being polite again?" "I'll put on my polite shoes," I said. Serena came to the doorway, leaning on the frame, hair pulled into a lopsided ponytail, eyes clear in the way pain makes honest. She looked at us like people look at a room they finally get to keep. "You're good at this," she said. "At what?" I asked. "Being here," she said, "and not making it a movie." "I can cry at the credits later," I said. "Promise you'll visit when I can walk more than a hallway," she said. "Promise," I said. "And text me pictures of your meals so I can judge your soup." She saluted with a spoon. She went inside slowly. Theo and I watched the light do its last trick. Back at the hotel, I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling fan, moving air in a circle like it thought it was solving something. I thought about keys and doors and how sometimes you show up and your only job is to hold the knob while someone else turns it. My phone buzzed. A Phoenix number again, but different. I answered. "Ms. Hart," a voice said. Quiet, professional. "This is Alan Kravitz, patient experience. I read your email. Could you come at 10 tomorrow and show us how to make our forms stop yelling? We are very tired of being yelled at without sound." I smiled into the dark. "We can do that," I said. "We like quiet that tells the truth." He exhaled, relief finding a place to sit. "Thank you. And your sister is in good hands here." "I know," I said. "Some of them are yours." When I hung up, I texted Aunt Corinne a single cactus emoji. She sent back a violet pen. I slept like a person who had not solved anything and had done exactly what she could. Mr. Kravitz met us in a conference room that had tried to be cheerful and settled for beige. He wore a shirt with the sleeves rolled once and the look of a man who had inherited 12 problems and a timer. "Alan," he said, shaking our hands. "Thank you for coming." "The privilege of quiet forms is ours," Theo said, because he can't help himself. 3 more people filtered in. IT, legal, and a nurse manager named Lee who scanned the room in a way that said she knew where the exits were and how to build new ones. A projector whirred like it also wanted to help. "We can't rewrite the law," I began, "but we can stop the screen from yelling." Lee smiled into her coffee. "Legal did not." We put our pilot on the screen. Mina's motion studies breathed the right kind of calm from a Figma file 3 time zones away. Theo walked through the structure, progressive disclosure, section headers that answered the question, "Why is this here?" A progress bar with defined steps where each step was a sentence people could say out loud. I handled the sentences. "This line," I said, highlighting text, "currently reads like a threat. We keep the legal content but translate it into human alongside it. You can't sign what you don't understand, ethically or in court." Legal cleared his throat. "We can't add promises." "Good," I said. "We're removing promises, we're adding clarity." Alan leaned forward. "What if we ship a style layer now while we start the longer fight to fix the sources? If we cut abandonment by 1/3 this quarter, like your pilot did, that's hours, return to nurses, and 1,000 small mercies to patients." Lee nodded. "The number of times I've said no, really, you can ask questions, would make a statue tired." It asked about integration. Theo spoke API and made it sound like friendship. Legal asked about risk. I told him that juries like plain language and that confusion is a liability more expensive than ink. We showed error message patterns that told you what to fix and why. Not, "You're wrong," in a box. Halfway through, there was a knock. Serena stood in the doorway in sweats and a hospital bracelet, hair braided badly, eyes clear. "I'm not here," she said. "Carry on." Alan waved her in like a proud uncle. "This is your sister." "This is my cautionary tale," I said. "She's very good at being right." Serena sank into a chair and watched. When we paused, she raised a hand. "2 things," she said. 1, say somewhere visible that it's okay to stop and ask a human. People need permission to need people. 2, put the scary words earlier. Don't lull folks through 10 screens and bury bleeding on page 11. Put risk where their attention still has blood sugar. Legal winced at the word bleeding and wrote it down anyway. We ended with 10 first week wins. Nothing pretty. All true. Replace all caps with bold plus plain language. Show why we ask in expandable help. Merge 3 signature blocks into one with sublabels. Real-time validation for dates and addresses, not at submit. Add save and come back that actually saves. Reading level target, 8th grade, or someone's grandmother. A banner that tells you where you are and what's next. Progress bar with back. That is not a lie. Link to an actual human. A receipt page that says what you signed in words you understand. Alan exhaled, like his ribs had been holding a meeting. Can you train our team? He asked. We'll pay, and we'll keep the lawyers fed. We can, I said. We'll pair with Lee's people for 2 sprints. Your folks ship the work. We teach them how. We signed an SOW by lunch. Serena fell asleep upright in the chair and pretended she hadn't. We tucked her back down the hall after, and she grabbed my wrist for half a second like a metronome. Keys, she said, and let go. The next 2 days, we worked a small miracle at scale. Lee found a room with whiteboards and bad markers, and we built a paper hospital. We taped screens to a wall, wrote copy in fat ink, and walked volunteers through with clipboards. People from transport, housekeeping, and billing showed up on breaks and told us where words lied. We paid them in tacos and respect. A registrar named Miguel said, I always say, this part is dumb, but we have to do it. Can the screen say that without getting me fired? I wrote, we know this is a lot. Your time matters. Here's why this question is on the form. And he beamed like someone had validated the way he had been human all along. Lee caught me staring at a line of forms with my hands on my hips. You look like a general deciding where to send the bread, she said. I hate red asterisks, I said. We all have a crusade, she said. Mine is unlabeled buttons. We shipped the style layer to a pilot unit by sunset. On day 1, average completion time dropped by 8 minutes. On day 2, the number of abandoned consents cut in half. On day 3, a grandmother left a comment that said, I didn't feel stupid. Lee printed it and taped it to the bulletin board next to her wedding photo. Alan scheduled a system-wide rollout. Legal, to their credit, didn't die. Each smiled with that exhausted joy that belongs to people who have made something work under budget. Serena was discharged on schedule. Theo and I stocked her refrigerator like we were teaching a class on soup. Before we left, I set a tiny terracotta pot on her windowsill with a sturdy cactus Aunt Corinne had overnighted. Name? Serena asked. Eleanor, I said. She tells the truth. You water her once a month. Serena tapped the pot like a promise. The no contact held like a good stitch. Vivian tried to test the seam by sending Aunt Corinne screenshots of social posts about children who weaponize mental health, and Aunt replied with the addendum Marcus had drafted in 14-point font and a picture of the fern giving side-eye. I didn't hear from my parents directly. I didn't look for them. Quiet is a choice you have to keep choosing. Phoenix nights cooled into something almost kind. We finished our training sessions and documented patterns like we were writing a field guide. Where errors hide, the surprising power of a line break, buttons that tell the truth. Alan's team threw us a sheet cake with too much frosting and a card that said, Thank you for making our screens kinder. Serena drew a tiny IV bag on the corner in pen and wrote, and for not stealing my morphine. We laughed because we were allowed. On our last morning, I walked the hospital halls alone with coffee in a paper cup and read the bulletin board flyers, grief groups, diabetic cooking classes, a notice for a code lavender team, peer support for staff. Lee had pinned a handwritten card between them, permission to step outside for 5 breaths. Manager approved. In the lobby, a man in janitorial blues was mopping with the precision of a surgeon. He looked up, nodded, and said, They changed the words on the iPad. Fewer people mad at me today? Good, I said. You shouldn't have to absorb a screen's bad manners. He smiled. Nobody ever says that. They think we're part of furniture. You look like a person, I said. He laughed and went back to making the floor look like care. Back at Serena's, I taped Grandma's letter to her fridge with painter's tape. Serena rolled her eyes and left it. I kissed her hair like the laws of our new country allowed. We flew home on a plane full of people who were also never going to be in the same room again. Durham received us with heat and the smell of cut grass. The new studio breathed like it had been waiting for us to make noise inside it. Mina ran toward me waving an iPad. Numbers, she said. Pilot results at the lab. Consent abandonment down 31%. Dr. Levitt wants to publish. Let him, I said. People believe journals like they believe men in white coats. Theo pointed at the good soup jar, now on the conference shelf. Overflow. We dumped the notes and read them out loud. Priya stopped apologizing to the screen. Kay's Vern is thriving. Jay built a calendar view that looks like a nap. Miguel says the banner saved him from a migraine. We clapped like a small church. It wasn't worship. It was relief. Adina called for our monthly check-in. We updated the scholarship plan. We named it without a committee. The Eleanor Keys Fund. 2 awards. One for a design student who knew how to draw doors. One for a nursing student who knew where to put them. We wrote an application that didn't read like a test. 3 questions. 1, tell us about a door you want to open for someone else and what it costs to hold it. 2, show us a time you made a complicated thing kinder. Pictures or paragraphs, both welcome. 3, what's your emergency number? The $300 that would keep you from stopping. We set aside a small emergency pool separate from the scholarships. No essays, only need, verified by a counselor or faculty name. Gatekeeping is expensive, I said on the call. Adina agreed. The dragon on my calendar purred. A week later, the first batch of applications arrived like a thunderstorm. 2 essays made me cry between meetings. One from a paramedic who designed zines about naloxone. One from a nursing assistant whose brother had been deported and who wrote, I am practicing being the person people call. We brought the team into the selection. Mina cried a little. Kay proposed an interview rubric that tested for arrogance the way you check bread for doneness. Theo built a spreadsheet that looked like a game and wasn't. Aunt Corinne joined by video with her braid coiled like punctuation and said, This is how money remembers it's a key? In the calm between sprints, life still had edges. Serena texted photos of healing incisions and bad cafeteria salads. She sent one at 3 a.m., a hallway, empty, a pair of clogs abandoned like punctuation. We lost a patient tonight, she wrote. Sepsis. It was already decided when they arrived. I stood with their wife while the room learned new rules. I wanted to call you, but it felt selfish with a stranger's grief in my hands. Call me anyway, I wrote. You don't have to hold things alone. Also, hydrate. She sent a water droplet and a skull. I sent a key. Vivian posted a Facebook photo of a flower arrangement and the caption, Choosing beauty where others choose bitterness. Aunt Corinne mailed me a magazine clipping about a woman who started med school at 48 and handwrote in the margin, People unlearn doom every day. I stuck it on the studio fridge with tape that didn't believe in quitting. On a Thursday, I found a letter from the county clerk in our mail. Someone had filed a name reservation for Heart and Heart Wellness, and the address was my parents'. Marcus called before my forehead could finish making a new wrinkle. Already handled, he said. I sent a letter reminding them of the non-use clause for your name and work in any business context. They withdrew the filing by lunch. Why? I asked, honestly confused. They want you back in their frame, he said. And they are slowly learning frames can be broken. Do they hate me? I asked, because sometimes the old questions ask to be let out to stretch. They hate the mirror, he said. You're just holding it. I put the phone down and traced Grandma's violet letters with my eyes until the loop-in tool stopped looking like a bruise. We closed phase 1 with the lab and started phase 2 without ceremony because work doesn't care about curtains. Theo and Mina prepped a talk for a healthcare UX conference in Boston. Dr. Levitt asked me to co-present with Priya. We wrote a deck where the first slide said, Screens should not scold, and the second said, Patients are tired. The third said, So are you. Before we left, I drove out to Eno and walked until the river was loud enough to turn thoughts down. I took the bakery box Rochelle had mailed. She still sends me sugar when she senses a sprint, and ate a cookie on a rock that looked like a whale. A heron lifted itself out of the water like a trick I never get tired of. At the conference, an audience of lanyards and laptops listened harder than I expected. Priya told a story about a patient who cried when the back button actually went back. I showed a slide of our progress bar and said, Honesty saves time. After, 3 hospital systems asked for calls. A lawyer with decent shoes asked for a white paper. A resident said, Thank you for not making fun of us. In the hallway, a woman stopped me. My daughter is at UNC for nursing, she said. She thinks no one sees the part where she holds hands. Tell her she's the point. She is, I said. The screen only points. Back in Durham, the team had moved the fern to the conference table because it was unstoppable now. We laughed because it looked like it had opinions about our agenda. Mabel did her slow parade under the table and demanded carrots as payment. That night, I cooked. Nothing fancy. A pot of beans that took all afternoon and forgave every mistake. I ate at my table with the windows open and the sound of cars being ordinary in the dusk. My phone buzzed. Serena. Eleanor survived the week without water. she wrote. I did too, I told a patient. You can say no and still be a good patient, he cried. I didn't. I will later. Keys. Keys, I wrote back. Proud of you. Sleep. She sent a photo of the cactus in the dark, a tiny silhouette with spikes like honesty. On a Friday, Edna, the 80-year-old who'd sold us the textile building, stopped by the studio with a bag of tomatoes from her garden and advice no one asked for. People will tell you to grow fast, she said, setting the tomatoes on the table like precious stones. Grow sturdy. Trees that shoot up fall down. Trees that take their time outlive weather. We're planting scholarships, I said, and told her about the first finalists. She said, good, and then, as if the thought had been waiting behind her teeth, are you going to write your parents one last letter? No, I said, but I'm going to keep living a life that doesn't need to defend itself. Same thing, she said, and bit into a tomato like it was a sermon. We named a conference room after her and didn't tell her. We painted Edna on the door in tiny letters that only show up when the sun hits right. Some gratitude wants to be a secret for a while. The Eleanor Keys Fund announced its first recipients in a post that used no stock photos and a lot of joy. A design student from Greensboro who had coded a grief tracking app for teens. A nursing student from Rocky Mount who ran a pantry out of her dorm and wrote, I want to be the person who answers the knock. We mailed each a key on a string with a card that said, use this on doors we can't see. They both wrote back. The designer said, I thought I had to be a genius. Turns out I just have to be stubborn and kind. The nursing student said, the $300 emergency fund means I can keep my car. It's the difference between the hospital and home. I pinned those words to the board over the sink, and Mina drew little door hinges on the edges. We took the team out for cheap noodles and expensive ice cream. We toasted with water because we were all in the middle of something that required clear heads. Theo made a speech that ended with, we're a roof, which made Kay cry again and blame the fern again. The fern took it personally. On the way home, the sky did a late summer thunderhead and the street smelled electric. I walked in the rain slow on purpose. My phone buzzed once. A Phoenix number. Serena? Attending asked us what our emergency contacts mean. She wrote, I said mine is a person who tells me the truth and holds the knob while I turn the door. A beat. You should know you're on 4 forms now. Good, I wrote. I like paperwork that admits it needs me. We added a bowl by the studio door with extra keys we didn't yet have locks for. Someone, Theo, stuck a Post-it on it. For later. That felt right. Some doors aren't ready to open. Some keys need time to learn the right hands. I slept with the window open and the sound of Durham forgiving itself. We opened the new studio on a Saturday with coffee in mismatched mugs and a bowl by the door full of keys that didn't know their jobs yet. The good soup jar became a wall, sticky notes under glass, each a tiny weather report. Priya didn't apologize to the screen. Rochelle sold out by noon. Kay's fern thinks it's a tree. Mina painted a narrow band of color around the room, violet like grandma's ink, thin enough to be polite, bright enough to be a promise. The Eleanor Keys Fund recipients came in timid and left loud. The nursing student from Rocky Mount hugged the cactus on the windowsill like it could confer powers. The design student from Greensboro stood under the tall windows and said, light is a design tool. And Theo offered him a job on the spot, half joking, half not. Aunt Corinne arrived with a tote full of oranges and said, you have the smell of a place that knows its work. We ate cake that looked like a blueprint and tasted like butter. When I thanked everyone for showing up, I didn't say the word family. I said roof. People nodded like they had been rained on and wanted to remember how it felt not to be. By Monday, the cake was gone, and the building told us the truth roofs tell in summer storms. The first hard rain arrived sideways, and water tested the brick like a lawyer. We found a line of damp along the north wall and the faint, infuriating kiss of a drip near the back stair. Theo climbed a ladder with a flashlight and a cursed vocabulary. I called the roofer and learned that urgent and calendar live in different zip codes. The next morning, Adina called with an accountant's version of weather. 2 quick items, she said. 1, the roofer's estimate looks fair. I've flagged cash flow for the month. 2, your building is due for ADA compliance upgrades in the next inspection cycle. The lift costs anywhere from $60,000 to $90,000, depending on whether we can source a refurbished unit. We have runway, but I'd like you to consider sequencing these costs. Translating, Theo said from the doorway, eavesdropping with intent. We need a new contract. The new contract arrived before lunch, wearing a blazer and the polite name of a national insurer, Brightline Mutual. The email subject line read, Experience Partner Exploration. The deck attached was glossy and optimistic. We admire your work with Valley General and the Durham Lab. Let's improve patient completion and reduce phone volume across our network. The SOW draft said all the right words until you looked at the invisible ones. Default settings that nudged people toward network choices, opt-out language tucked where attention goes to nap, a gentle friction on appeals. Marcus once told me, the worst clauses are the ones that smell like flowers. This deck reeked of lilies. We took the meeting anyway because roofs don't stop dripping when you don't like a sentence. The Brightline team appeared on screen from 3 cities, 3 ring lights, 1 smiling brand. We love what you did in Phoenix, said the VP with the calm teeth, but our environment is complex. Legal wants certain elements to be less prominent. Our metrics prioritize completion and containment. Containment of, Theo asked, eyes friendly, tone collecting nouns. Escalations, she said, and smiled like the word was virtuous. And costs. We don't hide exits, I said, before my calmer self could kick my shin under the table. We build doors people can see. Our members get overwhelmed, the director of something said. Sometimes making all the options obvious increases churn. Increasing informed churn is the point, I said. Screens shouldn't persuade. They should tell the truth and get out of the way. The VP's smile did not falter. We'll pay triple the Phoenix. Rate! Theo didn't look at me and I didn't look at him. The number would patch the roof, fund the lift, put us on a runway that didn't breathe heavy. It was also a check written in a language my grandmother would have refused to learn. Here's our counter, I said, and watched the 3 faces adjust to a reality they hadn't scheduled. We'll optimize reading grade, fix your progress flow, and write copy that makes lawyers and humans less itchy. But we will not bury opt-outs, appeals, or out-of-network options. We will not engineer friction to keep people from getting care they're entitled to. We will not build dark patterns and then paint them beige. Silence. Then, we'll need to discuss internally. Please do, I said. We're happy to help you do the right thing faster. When the call ended, Theo let his forehead kiss the table and groaned. You are a firebrand with good posture. We need the money, I said. We need to sleep, he said. Sometimes those are the same, not today. Adina texted 15 minutes later. Proud of your spine. We'll juggle cash flow. Consider interim financing if Brightline declines. Also, the county has a small accessibility grant if you can demonstrate community benefit. A public workshop series might qualify. I stared at the message until I could taste an idea. Community benefit. We made tools for people who did the work. What if the roof walked its talk? At lunch, I announced it with a mouth full of a tomato that tasted like it knew its own name. We're going to open the front room on Saturdays. Free workshops. Ask a designer for small businesses. Consent in plain language for health navigators. Portfolio soup for students. And once a month, a clinic with a lawyer, Marcus recommends, contracts for people who hate contracts. We'll make a case to the county that this lifts more than a wheelchair. Kay blinked. We'll be a library. We'll be a door, I said. Theo sighed at the spreadsheet in his head. We'll also be tired. Mina grinned. Write me a poster that doesn't look like a dentist. The next morning, Brightline replied with a paragraph that looked like a bruise under makeup. We appreciate your clarity. At this time, we need a partner aligned with our compliance philosophy. We wish you continued success. There was a PS about revisiting later, which meant they thought we might get hungry enough to bend. I closed the email and forwarded it to Aunt Corinne with the subject line. Said, no to a big check, send oranges. She replied with an e-transfer labeled for doors and a photo of her fern, which had decided to climb the bookshelf. Caption, sturdy beats fast. We filed the accessibility grant application with Adina's sensible fingers on the numbers. We promised 12 Saturday sessions. We attached letters from the bakery, the lab, the youth center with our mural on. It's brick. We wrote the line I believed more than any suit had ever said from a podium. Access is also typography. The county replied 2 weeks later with a conditional yes. Install the lift within 6 months. Document attendance at workshops. Offer 2 evenings a month for community groups at no cost. We'll cover half the lift, you cover half. The number hurt and helped in the same sentence. Half is more than none, Theo said, and I kissed his forehead in a way that made both of us laugh, and no one in the studio surprised. We bought a refurbished lift from a company in Greensboro after a salesman named Randy told us a story about his mother getting stuck between floors in the 90s and deciding to heck with stairs forever. He gave us a discount and a promise to answer his phone on Sundays. We bought the roof replacement after our roofer stood in the rain and said, "I can't stop this weather, but I can make you stop resenting it." In the middle of all this, Serena texted at 3:04 a.m. "Code lavender for a nurse tonight." She held a father whose son didn't wake up after the second round. We sat on the floor and breathed for 6 minutes. Your sentence about permission to need people lives on my badge now. I sent her a photo of the studio bowl full of keys and wrote, "Some doors are heavy. It's not a moral failure to ask for more hands." The first Saturday workshop, we set folding chairs in a circle and made coffee that didn't apologize. 20 people from the neighborhood came because we had flyered every corner deli and barber shop. An older woman brought a stack of forms from her doctor and asked if she was allowed to cross out the parts that didn't make sense. I said, "Yes, and write what you understand right next to it." A teen who wanted to be a designer showed me a sketchbook full of messy, bright ideas, and I told him to stop apologizing with his lines. A man who ran a landscaping business asked me to look at the postcard he'd made. I moved one sentence and one logo, and his whole face relaxed. 2 hours in, Theo stuck his head into the front room and whispered, "Riley, there's a guy with a briefcase who says he's from Brightline and wants 5 minutes." I stepped into the hallway, wiped my hands on my jeans like I'd been kneading bread, and found the VP with the calm teeth standing there in person, blazer and all, like a plot twist nobody needed. "I was in town," she said, which was obviously a lie. "I read your county application. Clever." "Clear," I said. "Clever is for magicians." She looked at the room full of chairs and cheap coffee and people holding pens like permission, and something behind her eyes adjusted a millimeter. "I wanted to say, off the record, that there are people at Brightline who want to do it the way you do. It's just not the season." "Seasons change," I said. "You can choose to be weather or be a person." She barked out, one-syllable laugh. "Do you sleep like this?" "Like what?" "Certain." "Some nights," I said. "Some nights I make soup at 2 a.m. She looked again at the room, at the poster Mina had designed that said, "Ask us how to make this kinder," at the bowl of keys, then at me. "If I send you a personal email with questions about my mother's Medicare portal," she said, "would you answer?" "Of course," I said. "Doors are for people, not companies." She nodded once, as if this had been the only contract worth signing today, and left. We finished the workshop with a stack of forms that now had notes in the margin like prayers. When the last person left, I sat on the floor with my back to the wall and let the quiet put its hands on my shoulders. Theo lowered himself beside me like an old man at a baseball game. "We could have used that check," he said, not accusing, just accounting. "We'll use these Saturdays," I said, "and the roof will stop complaining." Mabel patted in and put her chin on my knee like a pledge. She had stolen a spare key from the bowl and was chewing it like a trophy. I pried it out of her mouth and said, "Keys are for doors, not snacks," and she looked offended. The lift arrived in pieces the next week and took up the lobby with its promise. Edna watched the installers with a chair and a glass of iced tea like it was a parade. "I remember when no one expected to get upstairs," she said. "You're ruining stairs for people." Good. We hosted our first evening community group, a grief circle led by a social worker with a voice like a blanket. They wrote names on index cards and read them out loud, and the room held the sound the way old buildings do when they know what they're for. Between Saturdays, work didn't soften. The lab's phase 2, 8 mornings and afternoons. A county health department wanted a dashboard that didn't demean. A dentist's office wanted a website that didn't look like a horror movie. Theo led. Mina animated. Kay wrangled calendars and plants. I wrote sentences like, "It's okay to stop," until they started to sound like vows. Brightline stayed declined. We took a smaller contract with a public hospital in Asheville that paid like it had a conscience, slowly and fairly, and cried once on the phone when the admin said, I can't pay you what you're worth, but I can pay you on the dot. The scholarship committee met and did the work of choosing without pretending it didn't hurt. We set aside an extra emergency fund distribution when the nursing student's email arrived. My car died. The bus gets me halfway. I can't be late again, or I'll lose my spot. We wired $600 in 12 minutes, and she sent a photo of herself on the bus with a brand new pack of flashcards and the caption, "You held the door and the bus." Adina called to say the grant money had landed. The lift crew bolted the last bracket with a wrench the size of a baby. The first time we pressed the button and the platform rose smoothly, Edna clapped like a child. I rode it up and down and cried on the top landing because I was sleep-deprived and grateful, and it felt like a sentence finishing itself. That afternoon, Marcus forwarded an email from a realtor with a subject line that made my chest go hollow for a breath. Open house, 12 Hunter Lane. A photo slid into view. The house I grew up in, staged within an inch of its life. My room in pale gray with a bed that had never forgiven anybody. The porch with the brass knocker polished to pretend. The caption said, "Elegant colonial with updates and a story to tell." I stared until the edges got sharp. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Serena. "Heads up," she wrote. "Mom and Dad listed the house. The open house is Sunday. I thought you should know before you see it online. I'm on nights. I can't go. I don't know if you want to. No pressure. Also, I just taught a med student how to say I don't know without apologizing. Keys," I typed. "Thanks. Sleep. Hydrate. I'll..." And then stopped because I didn't know the verb. Theo came to my doorway like he somehow always knows when the past has sent a calendar invite. "You okay?" "They're selling the house," I said. He looked at the photo on my screen and made a face like he'd bitten an unripe fruit. "We can go. As roof inspectors." "Or as people," I said. "I don't want to haunt it." "You can walk through a room and not let it keep your name," he said. "I will bring snacks." I closed the email and turned off the monitor. The room was quiet enough to hear the building breathe. I thought about Grandma's violet note. Money is a key. Houses are too. So are open houses. So are Saturdays in a front room with folding chairs. "Okay," I said. "We'll go. We'll look. We'll leave and not take anything we didn't come with." Theo saluted. Mabel snored. Keyless, forgiven. The lift hummed as if to say, "Up is an option now." The roof didn't leak. The bowl by the door caught the light. On Sunday, we would walk back through a door I had once been shoved out of and see if it still knew my shape. Open houses smell like lemons and possibility. Realtors stage both. Theo parked 2 blocks away so the car wouldn't feel like a getaway vehicle. Arlington did that summer thing where the trees made a cathedral and the heat argued for a choir. We walked slow because nothing urgent was going to happen except to my heart. The brass 12 on the white post still leaned a little. Fresh mulch, flower boxes with geraniums pretending to be cheerful on command. A tasteful open house, sign staked into the lawn like a declaration of neutrality. "You ready?" Theo asked. "I'm not a ghost," I said, mostly to myself. "I'm a person who pays taxes." We crossed the yard. The porch boards remembered the weight of us. The door opened on the first knock. A woman in navy with sharp shoes and kind eyes stepped back, the way professionals do when they're selling you air as square footage. "Welcome," she said. "I'm Tamsin. 3 beds, 2.5 baths, updated kitchen, original trim. Please make yourselves at home." Home. The word didn't bite. We started to the right because we always start to the right. New paint. Crown molding that my father would have called an investment and my grandmother would have called fancy hats on plain heads. The living room rug was one of those pale ones that discourages living. The piano was gone. In its place, a console table with a tray of business cards and a bowl of lemons sweating under the lights. I stood where the piano used to be. I could hear Serena practicing scales until my mother's ring tapped the metronome and snapped the room into a better tempo. I could hear myself drawing on the floor because that was the only surface big enough for the picture in my head. I could hear the fight that ended in a suitcase and a sentence I no longer carry in my mouth. Theo slipped me a lemon candy from his pocket like we were at a funeral for a room. We moved to the kitchen, subway tile, quartz, an island that silently asked for friends. The window over the sink still framed the neighbor's maple like a painting that changes once a year. Staging had left a cookbook open to a recipe no one would actually cook. I ran a finger along the counter and felt nothing sharp. In the dining room, a young couple stood holding hands like a rope bridge. She had a notebook of sensible questions. He had the look of someone trying to calculate 3 futures while remembering to smile. "Do the schools here?" she began, and then noticed me noticing her. "Sorry." "You're fine," I said. "Good light in the morning. The porch does rain like a friend. Check the attic in summer. It keeps secrets." She laughed. "We're thinking of kids. 2, maybe." "Then you need mudroom hooks and forgiveness," Theo said. "He can talk to anybody's life like he's been invited to dinner there." We kept walking. Upstairs felt smaller because you can't stage air the way you remember it. The hallway runner was new but squeaked in the same place. My old room wore neutral paint and a bed dressed for a hotel. The window latch stuck. I smiled. I opened the closet and smelled wood and dust and the pencil my 12-year-old self hid on the shelf lip. The height marks on the door frame had been painted over. But paint is theater. The grooves stayed. If I turned my head and let the light do its trick, I could read the indentation where a dull pencil once marked Riley, 410, and then later 5-3. Because that was a day. I traced the air where the lines were. I didn't touch the paint. I didn't need to. My bones remembered. Across the hall, the room that had been Serena's looked like a guest room in a magazine. The closet still had the scuff where she threw a shoe on a day that felt like someday we'd laugh. We did once in Phoenix about soup. Down the hall, the bathroom tile we'd begged to keep, little hexagons like frost, had been spared. Someone had reglazed the tub. The mirror told the truth at an angle that didn't flatter. Good. Mirrors should be honest even when rooms want to sell. We took the back stairs to the basement. The old workshop bench survived under a coat of paint that didn't fool anyone who had ever sanded wood. The floor drain still hummed to itself. On the joist by the water heater, someone, my grandmother probably, had written numbers in pencil. Not heights, account totals. Eleanor used wood for math when paper was busy being other things. $114 on $70 was written twice and then crossed neatly with a little check mark. I swallowed a laugh and a sob at the same time. Theo saw the pencil and grinned like he'd found a signature. "Hey," he whispered and pointed. Under the joist, nailed into the beam, a tiny rusted hook, the cheap kind from a hardware store bargain bin. We'd hung a jump rope there once. When Serena got taller, we hung keys. We didn't take it. We looked until looking felt like a kind of touching that didn't violate anything, and then we went back upstairs. On the way to the front door, a woman with silver hair and grocery store flowers came in holding a paper cup. She stopped like memory had tripped her. "Vivian's girls?" she asked, and then winced. "I'm sorry, habit, you look like... I used to see you 2 on bikes. I'm Ms. Patel from down the block." "Hi, Ms. Patel," I said, because some names live in neighborhoods longer than paint. "We grew up here." "Good house," she said. "Holds heat in winter and grudges forever." She smiled to show she was allowed to say it. "I hope whoever buys it knows how to make soup." "They'll learn," Theo said. "We'll leave a recipe in the air." Tamsin intercepted us with a clipboard and caution. "Any questions?" I looked at her shoes, the kind that forgive long days. "Is the open house busy?" "Steady," she said. Neighbors, young families, a man who kept opening and closing the closets like he was measuring breath. "Owners aren't present," she added carefully, reading something in my face. "Good," I said. "Houses show better when they aren't trying to perform." She tilted her head. "You're not... If you are connected to the sellers, I can..." "We won't complicate your afternoon," I said. "Thank you for letting us walk the perimeter of an old story." Outside, the porch boards didn't buckle. The sun pushed against the maple like it was testing out autumn early. We stood on the top step and breathed. The last time I stood here, a sentence had shoved me into a future. Today I had walked myself back. "I want to do one thing," I said. Theo looked like a man, prepared to throw his body in front of vandalism. "Nothing with paint." "No paint," I said. I bent, picked up a tiny pebble from the flower bed, and set it on the porch rail where the wood meets the post. A small private cairn. A marker you'd miss if the house didn't know your name. "What does that mean?" he asked. "I was here," I said. "And I left on purpose." We walked down the steps. On the sidewalk, we passed a couple in their 50s, holding hands and house flyers. The woman said, to no one, "I want a house that has already forgiven me for something." And I wished her this one, or any with all the doors. At the car, my phone buzzed. "Serena." "How was it?" "Clean. Staged. My closet still smells like wood and pencil dust." The bathroom tile won the argument. I put a rock on the rail. "No ghosts." "Good," she wrote. Nights start again. A resident said, "I don't know," and then we looked it up together. Felt like cheating at the right game. "That's the game," I wrote back. "Drink water? Send cactus pictures?" She sent a photo of Eleanor, the cactus, who looked exactly like herself, which was the point. We headed south. Theo drove. I scrolled them through the MLS listing one more time, then deleted the link like a ritual. At a red light, an email landed from a personal address I recognized from a Zoom square, the Brightline VP. Subject: My mother's portal. Off the record. Riley? You told me to be a person. Here I am. My mother can't find the appeal button on her Medicare Advantage portal. It exists. It's hiding. Can you walk me through a better way to explain this to her? And if I can push one tiny change internally, what would you pick first? J. I started to type. Put the appeal button where a human would look for it, then stopped. People don't change because you yell at their nouns. They change because you give them a verb. J, I wrote, 2 things. 1, don't teach your mom where the appeal link is. Teach her the story. Any decision about your care has a second door. It's called appeal. You have the right to ask for it without apology. Then show her the click. Phone call is better. Language holds better on air than on screens. 2, if you can change one thing, rename the link to ask for a second review, appeal, and put it in the first screen of any denial. Not under more. One line. Big, plain language. If legal objects, tell them juries like sentences that sound like people. If you want, I'll look at the screen and mark it up in red like a teacher with mercy. She replied before we hit the beltway. Mercy teacher accepted. Thank you. Also, my mother will love you. Everyone loves a woman who admits forms are mean. I smiled. Not because it was a victory, because it was a hinge. Back in Durham, the studio's lift sat in the lobby like a promise someone had finally kept. Edna had left a note on the door in block letters. Up works. Down also works. Life should be like this. The good soup wall had new notes. Miguel got a raise for noticing a sentence. Priya taught 3 interns the comma that matters. Kay's Fern judged the plumber, and the plumber apologized. Saturday workshops crowded the calendar in a way that felt like purpose, not panic. The county asked if we could add one on small claims court without the panic. Marcus laughed when I forwarded the request and said yes in a paragraph that made me want to hug jurisdiction. Adina confirmed the second grant disbursement. The roofer sent a photo from the roof of our building at sunset. The sky looked like a bruise healing. We announced the Eleanor Keys Fund finalists at a community potluck in the front room. Plastic tables, crock pots, a tray of deviled eggs with paprika like confetti. The design student brought his mother in a neon sketchbook. The nursing student brought her grandmother in a gallon Ziploc of pound cake. Aunt Corinne stood by the punch bowl, telling a teenager why purple ink mattered if you said it mattered. Theo gave a short speech that involved the word door 4 times and soup twice. No one minded. After the applause, a man I didn't know pushed a stroller toward me and said, "My wife is in the car because crowds are hard. She wanted me to tell you she got through her surgery forms without crying this time. She thinks your commas did that." "Her courage did that," I said. "And a nurse named Kira in Phoenix." And he nodded, like the sentence made a bridge he could walk on. That night, the studio was quiet in the way full rooms are when you take the noise out. Theo stacked chairs. I swept because sweeping is a way to count blessings without sounding religious. Mabel found a dropped macaroni and ate it like a medal. My phone buzzed. Jay from Brightline sent screenshots of a denial page with 3 red circles around the word more. I marked it up in a fury with love. She wrote back, "You win. I'm going to lose an argument and then win it next quarter." I sent her a photo of the bowl of keys. She sent back a photo of her mother smiling in a living room with plastic on the couch arms. Caption: She asked for the second door. Serena texted, "We intubated and extubated in the same night." I didn't shake. I cried in the supply closet. Julian, night nurse, slid me a granola bar under the door like a spy. "Spy granola is the best kind," I wrote. "You're doing it right." "Do you regret going to the house?" she asked. "No," I typed. "We left what didn't belong to us. We took air. That's enough." I brushed my teeth, washed my face, let the water run until it forgave the day. In bed, I read Grandma's letter one more time, even though I knew it by now. Violet ink doesn't fade when you read it like a prayer. I slept without seeing doors I couldn't open. In the morning, I made coffee and stood by the studio window while Durham stretched. The lift hummed once as if to say good morning. The bowl by the door caught the light. We had Work. We had Saturdays. We had a roof and a rice cooker and a lawyer who answered on Sundays and a nurse in Phoenix who writes permission on whiteboards. We had the truth, on purpose. And somewhere in Arlington, a pebble sat on a porch rail, small as a comma, enough to change the sentence. The email subject line looked bureaucratic enough to be important. North Carolina Commission on Health Information, Public Comment Invitation. Sounds like a dragon in a suit, Theo said, leaning in my doorway. I opened it. Proposed Rule 12.3, Plain Language Patient Materials, Invitation to Testify. Attached. A PDF that smelled like decades of compromise. Dr. Levitt and Alan Kravitz had listed me as a practitioner witness, alongside a nurse from Raleigh and a patient advocate from Wilmington. Policy, Theo said, like he'd found a new toy and already imagined it in our living room. You're going to teach the state how commas save lives. Or how not to weaponize paragraphs, I said. We'll need numbers, stories, a slide that doesn't feel like homework. Mina's already building one in her head, Yari, he said, and he wasn't wrong. Mina walked past with sticky notes and muttered, back buttons should be legally binding, like a curse and a pledge. We penciled the hearing date on the whiteboard and circled it twice. Brightlines VP J from the briefcase in our Saturday hallway wrote from a personal address the next morning. You said seasons change. I have a small window. CMS is nudging us on appeals language. I can push a soft change if I frame it as compliance. Can you send one page, visual plus copy, showing where the ask for a second review link belongs and why, and how to measure success that won't scare legal? Also, my mom loved the phone lesson. She said second door to her friend at church. The friend cried. We built the one-pager like a scalpel, left side, the denial page on a phone with the link hidden under more, right side, the same page with a first screen line in plain language. Ask for a second review. Appeal. Under it, 3 bullets anyone's grandmother could understand. 1. You can ask for a second look. 2. Asking won't hurt your benefits. 3. We'll tell you what happens next. Footer. Measure. Angry calls down. Appropriate appeals up. Resolution time steady. If the graph tilts wrong, the sentence is wrong. Jay replied 8 minutes later. Bless you in a secular way. Going in. Grant Reality arrived wearing a clipboard and a ponytail, name badge reading Darla, County Office of Civil Rights and Access. She did a slow walkthrough of the studio, eyes kind, standards sharp. Lift compliant, signage good, she said, nodding at the braille we'd installed because, of course. Attendance logs? Kay handed over a binder thick with names, dates, and a column titled, What Brought You In? Darla flipped. Handwritten is. Fine, but you'll need consent if you keep the quotes with initials. We do opt in, Kay said, tapping a stack of signed slips titled, Yes, you can quote me. Red ink for consent, black for attendance. Smart, Darla said. Photos? Mina held up her camera, then the printed waivers, then an album of community nights, a grief circle, a contracts clinic, a group of teenagers holding designs that looked like mistakes, learning how to be beginnings. Darla smiled despite herself. Most places make community sound like a lobby word, she said. Yours looks like chairs. Edna arrived mid-inspection, carrying a Tupperware of brownies like it was standard permitting documentation. We built the lift, she told Darla. Now we're ruining stairs. Darla took a brownie and wrote, Edna, menace, benevolent, in the margin of her form. The grant disbursement hit 2 days later. Adina emailed a dry sentence that made joy. County funds received. Roof plus lift escrow topped. Proceed as planned. I sent her a photo of the bowl by the door catching morning light. She sent back a checkmark emoji, which, from Adina, is a parade. Phoenix called at 2:11 a.m. Serena again, because nights are her weather now. Spanish-speaking elder, bowel obstruction, family confused, interpreter stuck on another floor, she texted. Consent screen, a wall of English, went to supply closet, drew a picture, wrote segunda opinion beside it. Resident said I was overcomplicating. The wife squeezed my hand and said, Gracias por hablar como nosotras. We rolled 10 minutes later. Saved bowel. Your commas bought time. Julian says hi. I stared at the blue light of the phone and tried not to wake the city with my pride. Proud of you, I wrote. Sleep. Hydrate. Tell Julian his spy granola contracts have been renewed. In the morning, a message from Serena again. A photo of a paper towel with a Sharpie sketch of intestines and a little arrow labeled Aki Duel. Under it, a caption. Plain language works in ink, too. We should print that and put it on the fridge, Theo said, reading over my shoulder. HIPAA bless this kitchen. A tweet landed in our laps like a brick through a window. A hospital in Ohio had launched a new plain language consent redesign with screenshots that looked suspiciously like ours, down to the progress bar labels and the exact phrasing of you can say no and still be a good patient. The only difference, a sneaky more options chevron that hid out-of-network details. Someone stole the pie and added raisins, Kay said, offended on behalf of both design and dessert. My fingers went cold. Theo's jaw went keen. Mina whispered, "No." Marcus called without prompting because God has given me a lawyer with instinct. "I saw the tweet," he said. "I can send a cease and desist on the copyright violation this morning." "We will," I said. "And we'll do something else." We spent the afternoon doing what thieves hate. We opened our kitchen. We published The Good Patterns Sitmao, a free Creative Commons style library of the pieces that matter. The progress bar, the plain language banner, why we ask, the receipts with understandable summaries, the opt-out that tells the truth, the back that actually goes back. We wrapped it in a license derived from the Hippocratic license. You may not use these patterns to hide, coerce, mislead, or create friction that prevents exercise of legal rights. We named it like a thing someone's grandmother would approve of, and we wrote on the front page, "We built this to stop screens from yelling. Use it, don't twist it. We will notice." We shipped it. We sent Marcus after Ohio with a cease and please. Stop the copy. Adopt the license. Remove the chevron that hides the door. Publicly, we kept the tone that helps people change in daylight. Privately, Marcus sharpened knives. By evening, the link had thousands of hits. A resident posted, "Do you know how many hours of my life this saves?" A nurse manager messaged, "We've been trying to say this for years." A troll wrote, "Virtue signaling for profit," and I closed the tab because the rent was paid and the roof didn't leak. Jay from Brightline texted from her personal address, "Your kit is all over our Slack. Legal wants to stamp it. Product wants to ship it. I'm going to pretend you didn't send this to me." "Pretend away," I wrote. "Use the license. Don't be sneaky. Your mother will know." She sent back a laughing emoji and a photo. The denial page, the ask for a second review, appeal, line at the top in big plain text. Under it, a little banner. "You have the right to ask for a second look. Asking won't hurt your benefits." Caption, "Soft launched to 5% for AB. Calls down 14%. Appropriate appeals up 11%. My boss thinks it's his idea." "Good," I wrote. "Give him the credit. Let the sentence win." The hearing room at the Commission on Health Information was a rectangle with carpet that looked like it had been vacuumed by decree. A row of commissioners with nameplates. A clock that could make you sweat. Our panel, me, Priya from Durham, a patient advocate named Lenora who had a cane that matched her scarf, and a hospital lawyer who introduced himself as "here for balance." Alan had submitted our slides. Mina had printed 2 handouts that made comma placement feel like a moral choice. Dr. Levitt sat in the second row, a dean being small on purpose. I went second. Priya led the room gently through bed-level reality. "People apologize to forms," she said. "They shouldn't." Then she told the story of a consent that didn't scold, and the way a patient's shoulders dropped 2 inches when a screen said, "It's okay to ask questions." Lenora followed with a story about getting lost in a more menu and missing an appeal deadline by a day. "You made the door," she said, looking at the commissioners. "Then you hid the handle behind a plant." My turn. I breathed. I looked at the room like we were all very tired and wanted the same thing, to stop hurting people on accident. "Words are medical devices," I said. "You put them in patients' bodies. If they're sharp in the wrong places, people bleed. If they're dull where precision is required, people lose time they don't have." I put the good patterns slide on the screen. "We built this with nurses who have seen what forms do. None of it requires new law. All of it requires consent to be communication, not a shield." I showed 3 screens, old versus new. The commissioners leaned in, which is how rooms nod when they've been taught not to. A man with a bow tie asked about cost. I told him about hallway tests and hours returned to nurses and calls that stop being angry because the screen stops lying. A woman with a mountain pin asked what happens when legal says no. I told her juries like plain language and that regulatory bodies can set reading levels and visibility standards and enforcement teeth without choking hospitals. The hospital lawyer said something about flexibility to tailor experience and avoid confusing patients with too many options. I said, confusion happens when you put the door behind a curtain and call it a window, and someone in the back snorted. It might have been Lenora. We finished. The chair thanked us with the tone of a person who has also waited on hold with a child's prescription. We'll vote in 2 weeks, she said. Written comments accepted until Friday. Outside, on the steps, Priya hugged me like a person who uses her hugs sparingly. You were kind, she said. Kind is harder. People change faster when they don't have to defend their dignity first, I said. Also, I didn't say the word dark pattern into a microphone. You wrote it on your face, she said, then laughed. Saturday, the studio hosted Small Claims Without Panic. Marcus showed up in jeans and a plaid shirt and made jurisdiction sound like a neighbor. He taught half the room how to say, I will not be interrupted, and mean it. A barber from 2 blocks over practiced his line and left ready to collect on an unpaid invoice without setting himself on fire. Midway through, a man with a backpack asked if he could use the lift. Could we have a joyride? He said, sheepish. He and his daughter took it up and down twice. When they reached the top landing, she high-fived the railing. It's like the building is telling the truth about legs, she said, and then asked if she could press the button again. We said yes, because we are not monsters. Edna clapped, as is her custom. Aunt Corinne called from Carborough with the sound of a gallery opening in the background. Your kit is in an art show, she said, delighted. A graphic designer printed the license on muslin and hung it next to a series of hospital forms from 1978 to now. The wall label says, we can change our tools to match our ethics. People are nodding like they understand math. Grandma would have picked a fight with the wall label, I said. She would have, Corinne agreed. She would have asked for better verbs. Later that week, Darla sent a formal letter. Grant milestone met, additional funds released. Attached, a photo of her holding up a Saturday workshop flyer in our lobby with the caption, This is what compliance looks like when it's humane. I printed it and taped it to the bathroom door because everyone deserves encouragement at eye level. Serena texted from Phoenix, a photo of her badge with a tiny sticker under her name. You can ask questions. Julian had started it, she said. The night nurses made it a thing. They were printing 100. Screens are contagious, I wrote back. Good. She replied with a cactus in morning light and a sentence that made my ribs behave. I like the person I am at 3 a.m. now. I didn't think that was possible. The Ohio hospital removed the chevron and added a visible, out-of-network link after Marcus's letter landed with the force of a polite hurricane. Their CTO wrote us privately. We thought we were copying excellence. We accidentally copied your values without understanding them. We're adopting your license? Thank you for making the right thing free and the wrong thing expensive. I printed that too and taped it inside the conference room cabinet where we keep snacks. Joy belongs where crackers are. Jay from Brightline sent a midnight email that read like someone who had just won a small war and couldn't tell anyone. AB complete. Big rollout approved. The link stays. Legal asked for why we ask tooltips next. Told them it was your idea. Boss thinks it's his again. Mom called 3 friends to teach them second door. I think she started a union. I sent back a single key emoji, and then, because we are all children sometimes, a tiny confetti cannon. 2 Fridays after the hearing, the commission posted the vote online. Priya texted first. 4-1. It passed. Lenora called and left a voicemail that was just her laughing. Dr. Levitt sent a screenshot of the rule language. Plain language requirement at 8th grade reading level or lower. Visible appeal and out-of-network options on first screen. Prohibit deceptive navigation, enforcement through audits. At the bottom, a note. Implementation timeline, 12 months. Theo whooped so loudly that Mabel barked and then pretended she meant to. Mina cried and blamed the fern. Kay wrote, "Law has comma," on the whiteboard and circled it until it looked like a solar system. We didn't post a victory thread. We made coffee. We sat for 5 minutes in a circle of chairs like a rehearsal for gratitude. Then we went back to work because rules don't rewrite. Screens on their own. I drove to Eno at dusk with a muffin I didn't need and a thermos I did. The river kept up its part of our agreement. I set a small brass key on a flat rock and said, "Grandma," we turned a sentence into a law. A heron lifted off the water like a check mark. On the way home, my phone buzzed with a text from Serena. Attending let me lead. I said, "I don't know," twice, and then knew. Went home, slept 6 hours in a row, dreamed I found a door, and it already knew my name. "It did," I wrote. "We made it real today." She sent back a single violet heart. I put my own key in the bowl by the studio door and listened to the sound it made. The lift hummed. The roof didn't leak. The good soup wall collected 2 new notes. Lenora laughed and County said yes, and a third one Mina wrote in small letters only we would notice. When doors become policy, people stop apologizing to walls. We had picked the quiet fight. It had learned to speak. The headline arrived like a gavel. Trade group sues to block plain language rule 12.3. Filed in Wake County Superior Court. Plaintiffs, Carolina's Hospital Association, 2 national insurers, 1 vendor with a name that sounded like a whiteboard app. Request, temporary restraining order, preliminary injunction, argument, burdensome, vague, disruptive to established workflows. Translation, put the door back behind the plant. Theo read over my shoulder and made the low sound he reserves for emails that misuse the word innovative. "Of course they sued," he said. "Rules make furniture move," Marcus called before I could ask for him. "We're with the Attorney General's office on this," he said. "But the court will hear from industry practitioners and affected parties. That's you, if you're willing." "Yes," I said. The word felt like a coat I'd already hung by the door. "We'll draft an amicus," he said. "Plain language about plain language. Stories and numbers both. The judge who drew this case likes receipts." "What's the clock?" "Hearing in 2 weeks on the injunction," he said. "Short fuse, long day." I hung up and stood in the quiet. The studio tilted toward me like a room listening hard. Mina tapped the whiteboard with a marker. "We show the math," she said. "Minutes saved, complaints down, appeals visible, nurses breathing." Theo scribbled a header. "Amicus for people who sign things." Kay started a spreadsheet called Declarations, like a tiny revolution. We opened the front room and turned it into a machine for collecting truth. Priya came on her lunch break and recorded a statement about what happens to a shoulder when a screen says, "You can ask questions." Alan sent data. Time to consent down, error rates halved. Lenora brought a cane and a smile sharpened by survival. She stood at the window and told Kay how she missed an appeal deadline because Moore hid the door. Kay typed as if accuracy were oxygen. Lee zoomed in from Phoenix between shifts and said, "My nurses have stopped apologizing for the software," and the sentence put its head on my shoulder. Serena texted from a supply closet. "All right, residents need to stop learning that consent is a scavenger hunt." I didn't ask permission for pride. I just let it fill the room, then got back to work. Jay from Brightline sent an email from her personal address with a subject line that felt like a whisper. Not official. The body. Our trade group is one of the plaintiffs. I argued we'd look like villains. I lost. Soft win, I got pending implementation for internal tools so we can keep the ask for a second review line while the suit drags. I want to submit a declaration, but it would cost me my job. What can I do that still matters? I typed, deleted, typed again. "Don't set yourself on fire to warm a room full of people who won't notice," I wrote. "But if you can quietly gather outcome numbers from your soft launch, anonymized, those can sit in an amicus with the label large payer pilot. It will help the judge see that clarity doesn't break anything but confusion." She replied with a screenshot of a spreadsheet column. Calls marked angry appeal down 14%, appropriate appeals up 11%, resolution time steady. Caption: "You didn't get this from me." "The room is warmer," I wrote back. She sent a photo of her mother holding a church bulletin with the words, "Second door," circled in blue pen. I saved it like a lock screen for my ribs. "We called the amicus brief for the people who read the screens." Marcus stitched the spine. Mina laid it out like respect. Theo drew 2 graphs that looked like good news behaved. I wrote the sentences you use when you want a judge to see what a consent form does to a tired human being who doesn't speak courtroom. We printed 10 copies and held them like passports. We weren't alone. The Nurses Association filed. The Disability Rights Group filed. 3 county health directors filed together. A group of residents put their names on a page and typed, "We are tired of being forced to lie with buttons." Someone tagged our Good Patterns kit in a thread with a heart and a link to the Hippocratic license, and our site traffic tried to climb a wall. Saturday, the studio hosted a letter-writing sprint. Aunt Corinne showed up with a tote of violet pens and a stack of linen paper. "Judges keep odd things," she said, placing a pen in each hand like a tiny sword. "Let's give this one a future artifact," people wrote. A barber explained how a visible price is a kindness. A teacher wrote, "8th grade reading level isn't an insult. It's a welcome mat." A woman who had navigated her mother's hospice wrote a page that began with, "Please stop making us apologize to software," and ended with, "We were exhausted and still wanted to do right. Your forms were not tired in the way we were tired." Edna wrote in capital letters that somehow sounded like a hug, "I do not like stares or surprises. Thank you for fixing both." Mabel contributed a paw print at the bottom of Kay's page because democracy. Serena's declaration landed at 3:24 a.m. Phoenix time. It was 3 paragraphs and a drawing of a bowel on a paper towel. We scanned and appended with HIPAA-safe captions. It ended with, "I can practice medicine without perfect language. I cannot practice it ethically if the institution helps me hide choices from the people I'm treating. Do not make me learn the word workaround for consent." I read it out loud in the front room to a circle of folding chairs and people who nodded like a choir. The hearing day came dressed as a Tuesday. Wake County's courthouse smells like wood polish and patience. The courtroom assigned to the case had pews that made lawyers sit like parishioners. A portrait of a retired judge watched the proceedings with the smile of someone who knows fights take longer than they should. The plaintiff's table had 3 suits and a vendor with a laptop. The state had the Solicitor General and a woman from the commission with a binder that looked heavy with reason. Marcus sat behind them in the gallery, legs crossed, tie slightly disobedient. Our Rao held Priya in a blazer borrowed from Mina, Lenora in her scarf, Alan with a notebook, me with the violet pen Aunt had insisted I carry. The judge, a woman with gray hair pulled into an elegant knot and the kind of glasses that say, "Get to the point," took the bench, and the bailiff called the room to order. The plaintiff's lawyer started with alarm. Unfunded mandates. Confusion from change. Irreparable harm. He gestured toward printouts of our good patterns like they were weapons. He said flexibility, as if it were medicine. The state stood and did the thing good lawyers do, pulled the fog into a rope. Reading level requirements already exist in other contexts. This clarifies, not invents. Out-of-network and appeal visibility are rights, not marketing choices. The rule prohibits deception. It doesn't ban care. Plaintiffs' own pilots show improvements when clarity increases. She waved our graphs without making them theater. She used the phrase compelled obfuscation, and the judge's eyebrows moved a millimeter, which in court is a standing ovation. Then the judge did my favorite thing. She asked uncomfortable questions as if she were reaching for a light switch. To the plaintiff's lawyer, "When you hide an appeal link under more, do you intend fewer people to appeal?" He tried. "We intend a clean experience." And the judge cut him off with a palm. "Counsel, I'm asking about effect." To the state, "What's your plan for rural providers without a design team?" The Solicitor General, "We have a standard kit. It's free." She looked at me. "Built by practitioners. Ms. Hart runs the studio that published it." The judge's eyes glanced to me. I tried very hard to look like a responsible noun. The judge invited testimony because sometimes the bench wants mouths that use first-person pronouns. Lenora, leaning on her cane, said, "I missed the door once. It won't happen to my nephew if you keep the door where tired people can see it." Priya said, "I have not had to apologize to a screen for 2 months, and I am a better nurse for it." Alan said numbers while sounding like a person. When it was my turn, I kept to sentences that would fit on a sticky note. "Words are medical devices," I said. "We already put warnings on sharp instruments. This rule labels the sharp parts and tells you where the handles are." The vendor from the plaintiff's side said something about user burden and A-B variance. The judge tilted her head. "Do your revenue models assume people won't press appeal?" He said no in the way people say no when the truth is more complicated at the spreadsheet level. Marcus never stood. He didn't need to. He confined himself to passing the state a piece of paper at one point that changed the order of their argument like a comma that saves a life. After 2 hours, the judge said, "I'll take it under advisement," which means the room holds its breath for 2 to 10 days while the law does the dishes. As we stood to leave, the plaintiff's lawyer gave me a look like I had knocked on his door at dinner time with a survey. Jay texted me a single more from somewhere in a building with frosted glass and said, "We're watching the docket like it can blush." Outside, the sky did that Carolina blue that makes judges smug by association. We got tacos because nourishment is a strategy. Priya squeezed my hand once and said, "If she grants the injunction, we keep doing the good thing anyway." I nodded, because sometimes you have to say out loud that your ethics aren't jurisdiction dependent. At the studio, everyone pretended not to refresh the court website. We ran hallway tests, we answered emails, we scheduled Saturday. Theo drew a little stick judge on the whiteboard, banging a gavel made of a progress bar. Mina put a tiny fern frond in the drawing's wig, which felt like a blessing. A text from Serena. 2 nights ago, I told a family, you can ask for a second look. They did. The cardiology attending came down. Plans changed. The resident learned. I slept afterward for 4 hours without the kind of dreams that make my jaw hurt. P.S. The cactus is becoming a person. Is that normal? Yes, I wrote. Prickly people do very well in deserts. Proud of you. Drink water. While the court thought we kept our promises, the county asked us to host another clinic night. This one. What's this bill? We printed a banner that said, "Bring your envelope. We'll bring highlighters." An older man unfolded a hospital bill, like a map, and asked, "Can I just pay what I actually owe?" Marcus taught him how to talk to a billing department without turning it into a boxing match. A kid with a skateboard asked if the Good Patterns kit could be used for school permission slips because he hated feeling like he was signing away his lungs to go to the science museum. We said yes and wrote a little field trip truce template that his principal later emailed us to say had reduced parent calls by half. We did not become a permission slip shop. We did add a sticky note to the soup wall. 7th graders deserve doors too. Rochelle dropped off a bag of pretzels and said, "I heard you were suing the government or saving it. Either way, eat." And we hugged her like she was both verdict and friend. Aunt Corinne sent a 1-line email. "In case you need fortification," followed by a wire titled, "Violets for the Fight." Adina replied to the receipt with exactly 4 words. "Allocated. Onward. Proud of you." 3 days later, the court's order posted at 4:11 p.m. like a teenager changing their status mid-homeroom. Injunction denied. TRO moot. Motion to enjoin implementation is not supported by evidence of irreparable harm. Public interest weighs in favor of clarity. Rule 12.3 remains in effect, pending merits. Theo read it out loud, voice shaky in the places that matter. Kay shouted. Mina cried immediately because this is her move. Mabel barked at the wall and then at the fern, which took it in stride. I sat down on the floor and let my spine touch old wood. I read the best sentence twice. Words are instruments of care. The state may require that they be wielded with ordinary skill and honesty. The judge had written that. In a judicial order, in our state. I wanted to frame it in violet. Text messages dove into my phone like birds onto a just-filled feeder. Priya. We won the comma. Lenora. I brought my cane to the party. Alan. I might cry at work. Do not tell. Dr. Levitt. Publish? He will never waste a word. Jay. My boss thinks he won. I let him. Mom says, second door is now law, so God can rest. Serena. I read the order in the break room. A nurse I've never met said, finally. I put a sticker on her badge. She said, do we know you? I said, we know the door. A minute later, a separate number with an Arlington area code. I let it go to voicemail. Old rules, new muscle. My phone buzzed again. Serena. Heads up. Mom asked me to call you to tell you she saw. I typed. Thank you for the heads up. Then, you don't have to be a courier. She replied, I know, Keys. I'm proud of you. Sleep. You too, I wrote. Hydrate. We didn't throw a party. We threw open the front room. Saturday's workshop was standing room only. The topic board began as plain words in scary places and evolved into a dozen little chalk scribbles. A first-year med student asked how to tell a patient, "I don't know," without making it sound like she didn't care. Kay wrote scripts like sheet music until certain sentences felt singable. A woman whose husband was recovering from a stroke asked how to find the second door under 15 tabs in a portal that loved itself more than people. Theo drew a map with 3 arrows and wrote, "Email this person," in big letters next to a support address we knew would work. Edna sat by the lift with a stack of brownies and told anyone who would listen, "Up works, down works. Life should be like this," which seemed as good a closing argument as any court could ask for. Afterward, we cleaned. We set chairs on tables. We swept. The bowl by the door filled with a handful of new keys someone had mailed anonymously. Flat brass ones with teeth that didn't match our locks. A note. For later. We left them. When the last folding chair folded, I stood alone in the front room and read the judge's sentence again on my phone. I copied it by hand in violet and taped it beside Grandma's letter above the sink. Tool, key, door, law. The sun slid down to its evening chores. The roof held. The lift hummed once like a cat greeting a returning person. The fern did its leafy judgment, benevolent as ever. My phone vibrated with a phoenix photo. Serena on a break room couch, eyes closed, badge with "You can ask questions." Sticker visible, the cactus on a windowsill behind her, spiky silhouette backlit. Caption: "On nights we use your commas like splints." "Use them up," I wrote back. "We'll make more." The door opened and Aunt Corinne walked in, hair in its braid, 2 paper cups and a small box that looked like pastries or victories. "Heard you won a sentence," she said, smiling into the room that had won it with us. "We did," I said. "It has a gavel in it." She set the cups down and handed me the box. Inside, a fountain pen. Violet ink. My grandmother's nib. Refurbished. A note. "For when you need to sign something that makes more room." "I thought it was gone," I said. "I thought your mother threw it out," Corinne said. "Turns out she put it in a box labeled miscellaneous linens." "Fear does strange filing," her eyes softened. "This belongs to a person who knows what to write with it." I unscrewed the cap and signed my name on a blank piece of paper. The line was smooth, the color the precise shade of a bruise that has decided to finish healing. We sat on the floor with coffee in paper cups and split a pastry that tasted like stubbornness and butter. Outside, a couple read the workshop flyer in the window and pointed, and I thought, doors are now policy. We can move to hinges. On Monday, the lab would ask for Phase 3. The county would want more clinics. Brightline would likely send a memo about compliance to everyone with a login. The Ohio hospital would email for a training session. The house on Hunter Lane would belong to new people who might not know a small pebble on a porch rail can be a comma that changes a family sentence. And in Phoenix, a nurse would write "permission" on a whiteboard again, and a resident would say, "I don't know and learn," and Serena would drink water and send a cactus that looked like truth with spines. We had chosen the quiet fight. It turned out you can win with commas. The week after the order, the air in the studio felt lighter by half its weight, like someone had finally opened a window that had been painted shut. Dr. Levitt sent a 1-line email. "CMS is watching your rule." Then a second line, which is emotional for him. "Nice work, team." We didn't pop champagne. We printed more flyers. Saturday filled again. The front room did what rooms do when you put chairs in circles and tell the truth out loud. People brought envelopes, questions, worry that smelled like receipts. We brought highlighters and sentences that had been in our mouths long enough to be useful. Mina added another thin band of violet paint, this one wrapped around the door frame like a ribbon. "For compliance," she said, and no one objected. Serena got a week off. "I negotiated for sunlight," she said on the phone. "I'm spending it in Durham." We picked her up at RDU. She walked out with a small carry-on and a bigger scar than Phoenix cared to admit. The first thing she did in the studio was touch the lift and say, "Up works," and we said, "Down too," and let her ride it like a victory lap. We gave her the couch, the good pillow, and a stack of soup. She slept 12 hours, woke up, drank coffee in my kitchen, and read the judge's sentence, taped next to Grandma's letter, while holding the cup with 2 hands. "Words are instruments of care," she read. "I want to stitch that on a scrub top." "You'd get called into HR," I said. "Worth it," she said, and smiled. She came to a Saturday workshop and co-led a session we titled, "Saying, I don't know, like a professional." Half the room was med students, half the room was every other kind of person who has been lied to by confidence. Serena wrote scripts on the whiteboard and crossed out the ones that apologized too much. I don't know, she wrote, and I will find out, and underlined and twice. Practice it, she told the room. Make it muscle memory. People can feel when your mouth is lying to protect your ego. They forgive time. They don't forgive disrespect. A grandmother raised her hand. Can I take a picture of that? She asked. For my pastor. Of course, Serena said. He has to practice too. We ate Rochelle's cookies. She'd started sending us compliance confetti on Fridays and watched someone's shoulders drop 2 inches when the right sentence found them at the right time. That's a miracle dumb enough to live in daylight. A letter arrived addressed in careful block print. To the people who painted the door purple. Inside, a family photo. 2 adults. A toddler holding a wooden spoon like a baton. We bought 12 Hunter Lane. My wife says the hallway smells like pencil dust and joy. There was a small stone on the porch rail. We left it. We found a little hook in the basement. We hung our keys. Last night we made soup and fed a neighbor who was having a week. This house forgave us for something we haven't done yet. Thank you for whatever you did here before us. We passed the photo around the studio. No one spoke for a minute. Theo cleared his throat and said, We have been replaced by nice people with a wooden spoon. And I said, Good, and folded the letter like a blanket and put it on the shelf with the fern and the bowl of keys. I texted Serena a picture of the letter. She sent back a single word, peace. The Eleanor Keys Fund did its first check-in dinner. We doubled the table with 2 folding leaves and the stubborn belief that good things need elbow room. The design student brought an app prototype that made grief scheduling feel less like a tax form and more like a friend with time. The nursing student brought flashcards, a brand new stethoscope, and her grandmother, who kissed everyone's cheek like she owned more chairs than we did. We gave out 2 more small emergency grants during dessert because the room told us the truth. Rent is a door too. We signed the checks with Grandma's refurbished pen. The violet line looked like a secret a person decided to keep being honest about. Aunt Corinne raised her glass of seltzer and said, To doors and the hands that learn where to push. We clinked and didn't pretend it was easy. We didn't have to. You can drink to a road without pretending it doesn't have hills. Jay wrote from her personal account with a subject line that sounded like someone deciding to breathe differently. I resigned. I took a role at a nonprofit payer. Member rights and clarity. Small team. Smaller budget. Better nouns. My boss thinks he invented the second door. Let him. My mother asked me to tell you her church started a second door ministry. They sit with people on calls and don't hang up first. She says the gospel was always this. We just gave it a better button. I forwarded it to Theo with the note. We are contagious, and to Serena with church aunties with appeal scripts, undefeated. Jay added a postscript. We're adopting the good patterns license wholesale. Our lawyers asked what CC means. I said community courage. They think it stands for Creative Commons. I didn't correct them. The county sent a second inspector, this one a man named Julio, who wore kindness like a wristwatch. He checked the lift, the braille, the attendance logs. He checked that the front door opened easily and closed reliably. He stopped at the bowl of keys and smiled. I was a locksmith in high school, he said. Keys make people brave. Doors make them brave, Edna corrected, appearing from nowhere with brownies. Keys only remind them. He wrote doors with keys in the margin of his form and took a brownie for the truck. We stamped the Good Patterns kit into a real place on the internet and added a page titled Stories. It held simple notes. A resident said, I don't know, and then came back with the answer. Durham. My mom found the appeal link because it was where her eyes are. Charlotte. I stopped apologizing to the screen in front of my patient. Raleigh Field trip permission slip didn't make me feel like I'd adopted the entire class. Guilford County. The Why We Ask box kept me from calling the nurse station to yell. I used the empty time to make a sandwich. Boone. We printed the page and taped it in the bathroom at eye level because bathrooms are where victory posters belong when you don't want to embarrass them. A week later, a state 2 down called and asked if they could borrow our door. We said yes and mailed them the pattern on a roll like wallpaper. They sent back a photo of a progress bar in Spanish and a note. Our lawyers learned to say segunda puerta without flinching. We taped that up too. The studio learned to be a building with a schedule. Mornings belonged to work with invoices. Afternoons belonged to testing, to stories, to the act of making a screen polite. Evenings were sometimes ours and sometimes everybody's. Every other Thursday, a recovery group used the front room and left us a small bouquet of gas station flowers in a coffee mug that said Thumber 1 Dad. We kept the mug. Joy mismatches itself. Mabel continued to steal keys from the bowl like trophies and then look surprised when we asked for them back. Kay swore the fern had learned to lean toward whoever was telling the most honest story and started keeping tally. Mina added fern votes with heart to the soup wall in tiny print. Theo drew a graph of good days versus long days versus days with tacos. The taco line was an outlier and we didn't mind. One night, after a workshop, I found myself alone in the front room with the violet pen in my hand and a blank piece of paper. The urge felt like weather. I wrote a letter I didn't know I had in me. Mother, you called after the order. Serena told me I did not return the call. That is not cruelty. That is a boundary that lets me do this work and sleep in the same week. I am not writing to relitigate what you already know the shape of. I am writing to tell you something true, so it can be true, whether or not you ever read it. There is a room in Durham where we teach people how to find the second door. It has a lift that works, a roof that doesn't leak, and a bowl of keys by the front door. Sometimes the people in the room are nurses and lawyers. Sometimes they are 7th graders and barbers. Every time the room does the same thing, it makes space for a person to be human without asking them to apologize first. This is the room I choose to be a daughter in. If you want to meet me, this is where I will be. Not in memory, not in a staged living room, not on the phone while you perform regret in front of an audience. Here, on Saturdays, in a circle of chairs, you can come and sit and learn where the handles are, and you can leave again without owing me anything other than the honesty you owed me years ago. If you decide never to come, the door will still exist, and so will I. Riley. I looked at the paper for a long time. I did not put it in an envelope. I folded it once, perfectly, and slid it into Grandma's letter, behind the line that says, tool and key, because sometimes the only person who needs the letter is the one who wrote it. I slept like someone who had returned a borrowed book. Brightline's second email after Jay's resignation was anticlimactic on purpose. We are adjusting our member-facing materials to align with Clarity guidelines. No names, no credit, no apology. Good. The door moves even when nobody celebrates the hinge. The Ohio hospital that had copied our patterns wrong sent a photo of their new consent screens with the chevron gone, the out-of-network link visible, and a note that said, "We said we were sorry to our nurses." They said, "Good. Now help us fix billing. We are very busy and very tired and finally in the right direction." I forwarded it to Lee in Phoenix. She replied with a photo of a whiteboard that said permission in 3 languages. We held a small ceremony for the lift because Edna demanded it. She cut a ribbon with scissors big enough to be a cartoon. We put a small brass plaque near the button. Eleanor. Up works, down works. Life should be like this. Aunt Corinne cried quietly and blamed the brownies. Serena watched on FaceTime between cases and clapped with one hand. The fern looked on, approving as is its way. After the ribbon, people took turns riding the lift like it was a carnival and a statement. An older man put his palm on the rail and said, "I used to avoid places like this." And we said, "Me too." And let that be both a design critique and a confession. The lab's Phase 3 started with a new cohort and a bigger whiteboard. Priya trained 3 nurses to run hallway tests without waiting for permission. One of them wrote, "You don't need to be brave alone," on a Post-it and stuck it on her badge, then texted Serena a photo. Serena texted back a cactus and sunglasses. The emojis did their work. Dr. Levitt opened our kickoff by pointing at a slide that said Rule 12.3 and saying, "Part of this started 2 miles from here." We did not clap. We got our markers out and started counting verbs. On a Sunday, I drove to Eno with Serena, who had flown in for 48 hours because a person can only drink so much desert before she needs trees. We walked the same trail and sat on the same rock. The river kept our secrets at the same speed. Serena pulled a small pebble out of her pocket. Not the porch one, a new one. "For the studio!" "Rail," she said. So the sentence keeps changing. We put it in my palm, then in hers, then set it down on the flat place we use for a table and drew a tiny comma on it with the violet pen. We let it dry, then tucked it into my pocket. "Do you think Mom will ever come?" she asked. Maybe, I said. Maybe not. Both answers are doors. We've learned where the handle is on ours. She nodded. I don't hate her, she said, surprised as she said it. Me neither, I said, not surprised. Hate is a door that slams on your own hand. We watched a heron take off like a sentence across water. We went home. We put the comma stone on the studio rail next to the bowl of keys. It looked like punctuation doing its job. Small, decisive, changing the meaning. The last thing that happened before the first frost. The first two Eleanor Keys recipients came back to teach. The designer from Greensboro ran a teen workshop on making hard things gentle. The nursing student from Rocky Mount ran one on talking to tired systems without losing your mind. They opened the door like they had always lived here. They will. That's how rooms work when you stop acting like you're the first person to need them. We set more chairs, we added mugs, we wrote another small grant. We returned 3 calls from hospitals who wanted to borrow our door. We said yes with the license attached. We said no to 2 contracts that would have paid for nicer chairs but cost us sleep. I stood by the window at dusk with a cup of tea and watched the street put itself to bed. The lift hummed once, as it does, like a cat saying, present. The fern leaned toward the last honest voice of the day. The bowl of keys caught the last light. On the corkboard above the sink, Grandma's violet letter and the judge's sentence held each other in place with a single tack. Under them, a new scrap in my handwriting. Promise, we will keep the door where tired people can see it. Progress, we taught a screen to whisper and a room to listen. Payoff, up works, down works. Life, more often than not, like this. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and went home. Through a city that had learned one more way to be kind on purpose. In the morning, we would make more commas. We would pass out more keys. We would hold the knob while someone else turned it. We weren't finished. We were finally underway.